Chapter 99. Mo Tiange naturally didn't know what Wei Jiasi was shocked about, but right now, she couldn't care less about it. Now that her cultivation technique was more or less complete and her pill concocting had also gradually entered a good state, it was time for her to prepare to build her foundation. She had 1 foundation building pill and 2 foundation refining pills. If she could concoct constitution enhancing pills, then under Martial Uncle Xuanin's guidance, her chances of building her foundation would be very high. She had already bought the remaining ingredients for the constitution-enhancing pill one by one. Now, she only lacked the other 500-year-old spiritual herb, green fern. Thus, she asked the shop in the inner sanctum to help her keep an eye out for it. She didn't know whether it was because the sex shop had a sufficient supply or because of Lord Daoist Jinghe's reputation, but a few days later, she received a sound-transmitting talisman saying the black fern had arrived. Mo Tiange hurriedly packed her things, then went to the inner school market square. The inner sect market was on the main peak. It wasn't big and only had 2 streets. However, there were many disciples and people coming and going. It was very lively. Most of the shops here were opened by the various peaks, and the disciples of the peaks could get discounts in the shops. In addition, disciples who wanted to sell things could directly set up a small stall on the side of the street. It was very convenient. The law enforcement hall would protect anyone who bought or sold here. If anyone was found to be selling or buying or selling by force, they would be ordered to refund their money. If it was serious, they might even be expelled from the sect. Therefore, the disciples of the sect liked to come here. Once she arrived at this small market square, she didn't stop and directly went to the medicinal pills hall on Clear Spring Peak, which had notified her of the arrival of the goods. This medicinal hall wasn't big, but its business was very good. Aura refining disciples came and went from time to time, and foundation building cultivators were also not uncommon. Luo Fengxue once told Mo Tiange that Xianxia School had more than 500 foundation building disciples. Mo Tiange believed her. On Mount Taikong, one could easily run into foundation building cultivators whenever they went out. Obviously, there were a lot of them. Senior Marshal Brother, Mo Tiange stepped into the shop and called out to the busy shop assistant, "I'm here to pick up the black fern." The shop assistant was wearing ordinary disciple's clothes and his cultivation level was only in the 5th layer of the aura refining realm. Upon hearing her words, he turned around and saw the clothes she was wearing. He waved his hand repeatedly. "Senior Marshal Sister, you're really overpraising me. Green Fern? Are you Senior Marshal Sister Mo from Clear Spring Peak?" Upon seeing the shop assistant's terrified expression, Mo Tiange finally realized that her identity was different now. She didn't need to be as humble as she was in Yunwu sect. She was Patriarch Jinghe's registered disciple. This identity was something even foundation-building cultivators coveted. In Xianxia School, it didn't matter if she was a bit arrogant, but if her attitude was too low, people would look down on her instead. Thinking to this point, she calmly accepted and said to the waiter, "That's right. You sent me a message saying that the 500-year-old fern has arrived. I'm here to pick it up." "Senior sister, please wait here for a moment," the shop assistant said and hurriedly ran to the back. "Senior Marshal Sister." Another waiter served tea and said to her with a smile, "Please take a seat and have a cup of tea." Mo Tiange nodded at him and said, "Thank you." Just as he picked up his teacup, another person came in. When the waiter serving tea saw this person, he hurriedly went forward to greet him. "Marshal Uncle Yi, you're here." The person who came in was a foundation establishment cultivator, and he had the appearance of a young man. He casually glanced around the shop then asked, "Are the 7 stars begonia in stock?" The waiter smiled and said, "It just arrived today. Please take a seat, I'll go get it." As he said that, the waiter shouted towards the inside of the shop. He then invited the young man to sit next to him and served him tea. The young man took a sip of tea. As if he sensed Mo Tiange's gaze, he turned around and gave her a kind smile, then continued to drink tea with his head lowered. This person's attitude was peaceful. He obviously didn't know her identity, but he didn't reprimand her for being rude. Apparently, he was a gentle person. Mo Tiange didn't show the respect ordinary aura refining disciples showed when they saw a foundation building senior. Instead, she looked hesitant and asked tentatively, May I ask who this martial uncle is? Upon hearing her voice, the man looked up. Mo Tiange carefully looked at this person's extremely heroic face and recalled how he called her martial uncle Yi just now. She was about 50 to 60% sure, but she still needed to confirm something. Martial uncle, is your surname Yi, and your name is Jingwen? Once she said that, the person in front of her revealed a puzzled expression. Yes, you know me? Sure enough, it's him. Yi Jingwen's appearance hadn't changed much. 10 years was nothing to a foundation-building cultivator. Now that he still looked like a young man, she recognized him at first glance. Looking at his familiar face, Mo Tiange felt many things from the past resurfaced in her mind. Martial uncle, do you remember the Mo family's village in Lianqing City in Jin Country 10 years ago? Yi Jingwen was stunned for a moment, then he looked a little surprised. He looked at her carefully and finally came to a realization. You're that little girl? Mo Tiange nodded with a smile, then stood up and saluted him. Back then, I didn't appreciate your kindness and left without saying goodbye. Today, I apologize to you. Seeing her salute him so cautiously, Yi Jingwen hastily stood up and also saluted her. Please don't regard me as an outsider. It's also my fault for not explaining clearly. Before he could finish his sentence, the waiter who fetched the goods ran back and shouted, Martial Uncle Yi, Senior Martial Sister Mo, your spiritual plants. You two know each other. The waiter was obviously confused and even forgot to hand them the medicine. The other waiter was quick-witted. He took the medicine and handed it to the two of them. Martial Uncle Yi, Grandmaster Mo, take a look. Is there any problem with this thing? Mo Tiange and Yi Jingwen looked at each other and smiled. They each took the things they wanted. Not bad. This black fern is old enough. How much is it? The waiter said, it's 300 spirit stones in total. Since you're a disciple of Clear Spring Peak, you can get a 10% discount, so it's 270 spirit stones. Even if black ferns weren't rare, this price was already very cheap for a 500-year-old spiritual plant. Mo Tiange didn't say anything and paid the spirit stones. By the time she put away the spiritual plants, Yi Jingwen had finished his transaction and walked towards her. Tiange? Mo Tiange nodded with a smile. Yi Jingwen also smiled. As the two of them walked out of the shop, Mo Tiange heard him say, I was in closed-door meditation a while ago. I only heard you came to Xianxia school 2 days ago when I came out, so I didn't have time to greet you. You've really grown up. I couldn't even recognize you. No wonder he wasn't too surprised. It turned out he already heard about it. Martial Uncle Yi, hey, don't call me that. Yi Jingwen shook his head to stop her. I already know Grandmaster Jinghe accepted you as a registered disciple. Even if registered disciples aren't ranked according to seniority, you're still being taught by Martial Uncle Xianxia now, right? According to the rules, it's enough for you to call me Senior Martial Brother. Besides, back then, you called me Big Brother Yi. Mo Tiange thought for a moment, then changed the way she addressed him. Big Brother Yi. Yi Jingwen sighed with emotion. In the blink of an eye, so many years have passed. You're also a big girl now. Tiange, have you been well all these years? For a moment, Mo Tiange didn't know how to answer this question. If she said she was well, she'd actually suffered a lot. If she said she wasn't well, second uncle treated her like his own life, which made her feel really happy. I've been doing okay. Yi Jingwen could see her complicated expression, so he thought she'd had a hard time all these years. He sighed and said, it's my fault for not explaining things clearly back then. After the two of you went missing, I didn't understand what happened. It wasn't until I heard about you 2 days ago that I finally knew there was such a reason. In fact, Mo Tiange felt very sorry for what happened back then. She always suspected he had bad intentions. Now that she heard he was confused for 10 years, she couldn't help but feel apologetic. I'm sorry, Big Brother Yi. My second uncle was just worried, so he caused you to fail your mission. Yi Jingwen said, you don't have to be like that. You left on your own accord, and Senior Martial Brother Zheng from Mount Dongmeng testified for me. I wasn't punished, and Martial Uncle Shoujing even gave me a lot of benefits. If it weren't for that, how could I have entered the middle stage of the foundation building realm so quickly? Then I have to congratulate Big Brother Yi. Mo Tiange knew Yi Jingwen wasn't very old. Back then, he seemed to be about 30 years old, so presumably he was only 40 years old now, right? He was already in the middle stage of the foundation building realm at this age, so he could be considered very young. Yi Jingwen smiled and shook his head. I was just lucky, it wasn't my own ability. On the contrary, you were only in the second layer of the aura refining realm back then, but you reached the peak stage of the aura refining realm 10 years later. You're not any worse than the elite disciples of big cultivation groups. Mo Tiange just smiled. I just ate a lot of medicinal pills. What she said was the truth. If second uncle didn't make her eat medicinal pills, she would have been in the 6th or 7th layer of the aura refining realm at most. It would have been too early for her to build her foundation. Don't be so modest. If you'd been at Xianxia school all these years, I definitely wouldn't have praised you. Mo Tiange couldn't help but laugh. What he said was true. Others might not know her aptitude, but Yi Jingwen was very clear about it. With 5 spiritual roots and no big cultivation group to rely on, being able to cultivate to the foundation building realm in 10 years was already very rare. Right, how did you meet Martial Uncle Shoujing? This is too much of a coincidence. Mo Tiange was puzzled. I didn't meet Martial Uncle Shoujing. I just met Senior Martial Brother Qin Shi. My second uncle used a sound-transmitting talisman to ask Martial Uncle Shoujing for help. Coincidentally, he was nearby, so I was ordered to come and help. Qin Shi. Yi Jingwen was baffled. This name, he'd never heard of it. Although there were many people in Clear Spring Peak, since this person could make Martial Uncle Shoujing entrust this kind of thing to him, he should at least be an advanced inner disciple like them. Yes, Big Brother Yi, do you know him? Senior Martial Brother Qin is Martial Uncle Shoujing's blood-related junior, so he should be in the same generation as you. Blood-related junior? Although Yi Jingwen still didn't understand what was going on, his intuition told him that there must be something wrong. In fact, he also didn't know what Martial Uncle Shoujing's real name was. Could it be, with that thought in mind, Yi Jingwen asked again, the senior Martial Brother Qin you mentioned? Is he about the same height as me, doesn't like to talk, has few expressions, and only likes to cultivate every day? I see. But it's not like Senior Martial Brother Qin doesn't like to talk. After we get to know each other, he often smiles. Big Brother Yi, what's wrong? Mo Tiange felt a bit strange. Is Senior Martial Brother Qin not popular? Why does everyone look like this when they know I know Senior Martial Brother Qin? It's nothing. Yi Jingwen wiped the sweat from his face and changed the topic. Are you going to build your foundation now? Mo Tiange nodded. Almost. After some time, I'll finish my preparations and enter closed-door meditation to build my foundation. And being well prepared is only good for building your foundation. There's no harm in doing so. If there's anything you need my help with, don't hesitate to tell me. Seeing how serious he was, Mo Tiange smiled and said, Thank you. Chapter 100. After reuniting with Yi Jingwen, Mo Tiange often received things from him. Sometimes it was some ancient books he collected, and sometimes it was his own experiences, all of which were helpful to her. In fact, if she thought about it carefully, Yi Jingwen might have wanted to curry favor with Martial Uncle Shoujing when he befriended second uncle and tried to get closer to her. However, Yi Jingwen didn't let them down. Now that he knew she had suffered a lot over the years and that he always looked after her, Mo Tiange only felt grateful towards him. Under Martial Uncle Xuanin's guidance, Mo Tiange's cultivation was also very smooth. In several months, the spiritual aura in her body had completely transformed into Yin's spiritual aura. Her pill concocting progress was also smooth. Although she wasted a lot of materials, she still managed to concoct constitution-enhancing pills before she ran out of materials. After adjusting her mentality, she reported to Martial Uncle Xianin that she was going to enter closed-door meditation to build her foundation. In the hall of Master Daoist Xuanin's Immortal's cave, Mo Tiange and Luo Fengxue stood together in the center. Master Daoist Xianxia was sitting cross-legged in the hall with many of his disciples standing on either side. Some were smiling at him while some were expressionless. After a long time, Master Daoist Xianxia opened his eyes and looked at the two of them. Immortal looked calm, but Luo Fengxue was a bit excited. Today was the day they would enter closed-door meditation to build their foundation. Coincidentally, Luo Fengxue had already decided to build her foundation in the near future, so the two of them chose the same day. Master Daoist Xianxia looked at them for a while, then said slowly, "The two of you have succeeded in your cultivation. Today, you'll enter closed-door meditation to build your foundation. I'm very pleased that you're about to take a new step forward." Luo Fengxue knelt down and said, "It's all thanks to Master's guidance." Immortal also knelt down. Although she wasn't Martial Uncle Xuanin's disciple, he had been teaching her for the past several months, so it was natural for him to treat her like a master and a disciple. Master Daoist Xianxia smiled and said, "After you enter closed-door meditation, I'll keep an eye on you with my divine sense. If anything goes wrong, I'll tell you to stop. Therefore, you can focus on building your foundation without worrying." Immortal and Luo Fengxue said together, "Thank you, Martial Uncle, Master." Master Daoist Xianxia nodded and gestured for them to stand up. He then took out 2 jade bottles from inside his robe and ordered eldest martial sister Han Qingyu, who was standing on the side, to give them to them. "These are mind-calming pills Grandmaster bestowed upon you. They can help the two of you condense your spiritual aura. After you take the foundation-building pills, take these pills as well." "Yes." "All right, you guys can go now." Once he finished speaking, Master Daoist Xianxia closed his eyes. Immortal and Luo Fengxue solemnly saluted him, then slowly withdrew from his immortal's cave. Tinga. On their way back, Luo Fengxue asked with a heavy heart, "Are you confident?" Immortal, on the other hand, was calm. She gently shook her head and said, "I'm not sure." Upon hearing what Immortal said, Luo Fengxue seemed to heave a sigh of relief. She then softly confessed, "To tell you the truth, I'm very scared. I had an older brother who was extremely talented since he was young. Everyone thought that he would have no problem reaching foundation establishment, but in the end he failed twice. In the end he was plagued by inner demons and committed suicide." Immortal's heart thumped. She knew those who were accepted as disciples by core formation cultivators definitely had double spiritual roots or higher. Since Luo Fengxue mentioned her brother's natural endowments were outstanding, then her brother's natural endowments must be even higher than double spiritual roots. Such a person unexpectedly fell at the foundation-building stage. Sure enough, Luo Fengxue continued to speak. "Although I also have double spiritual roots, I've never been able to compare to my older brother since I was a child. In fact, I could have built my foundation 3 years ago, but my mentality was unstable, so Master told me to wait a few more years. I'm really scared to enter closed-door meditation this time." Immortal comforted her. "Senior martial sister Luo, don't worry. Foundation building isn't something that can be done overnight. No matter how talented you are, you can't be sure you can build your foundation on the first try. So what if you fail once or twice? We're still young. If we can't succeed once or twice, we'll succeed 3 or 4 times, 5 or 6 times." Upon hearing what Immortal said, Luo Fengxue calmed down a bit. She forced a smile and said, "What you said is reasonable. I'm only 22 now. Foundation building pills are issued every 3 years. Even if I succeed 10 times, I'll still be in my 50s. "Exactly." Immortal smiled and said, "Even among elite disciples, many of them only build their foundation when they're 40 or 50 years old, right? Don't be like your older brother. His natural endowments are obviously good and he'll definitely succeed if he persevered, but he was defeated by inner demons." As they spoke, the two of them arrived outside their cave. Luo Fengxue took a deep breath and reached out her hand to Immortal. Immortal understood and also reached out to hold Luo Fengxue's hand. The two of them encouraged each other. "See you in half a year." Once they returned to the cave, Immortal first took a bath and changed her clothes, then burned some incense. She waited until her emotions were calm before she sat down cross-legged. The spiritual aura inside her body slowly flowed along her meridians until it reached her dantian. She emptied her mind and no longer controlled her thoughts. Gradually, she seemed to be able to hear the sound of the wind blowing outside the cave. Her divine sense slowly dispersed in the wind, but it also seemed like her whole body was moving up and down along with the wind. The fragrance of flowers and grass, the sweet smell of the earth, one by one, assaulted her senses. In the end, she couldn't hear anything and couldn't feel anything. The only thing left was the boundless world. At this moment, Emotienga first took a heart-calming pill, then took a foundation-building pill, a constitution-enhancing pill, and a foundation-refining pill. The moment the foundation-building pill entered her abdomen, her dantian seemed to burst into flames with a loud bang. A powerful spiritual aura exploded in her dantian and flowed into her meridians. This spiritual aura was really too overbearing. For a moment, Emotienga didn't know what to do. Right at that moment, she heard Martial Uncle Xuanins shout in her mind, "Calm down. Don't resist it. Guide it slowly." Once he shouted, Emotienga immediately calmed down. She immediately followed Martial Uncle Xuanins' instructions and used her own spiritual aura to slowly guide this overbearing spiritual aura. At first, this spiritual aura didn't listen to her at all. It was very difficult for her to control one or two strands of it, but it soon broke free. She wasn't discouraged. In the end, she managed to control a bit of it and slowly increased it. She didn't know how much time had passed, but she finally had complete control over this spiritual aura and guided it to attack her meridians. This attack, however, was incomparably painful. Her meridians were forcibly widened. Every inch of them seemed to be broken, but they were instantly repaired. However, when the next spiritual aura attacked them, they were still broken in an instant. Amidst the incessant pain of being broken and repaired, her meridians widened little by little and became tougher. The impurities inside her body were also pushed out by this powerful force until they were expelled from her body. Her dantian, on the other hand, was on the verge of collapse. It was difficult for it to absorb this huge spiritual aura, but it was stabilized by other forces, allowing her to persevere. Emotienga didn't know that Master Daoist Xianin wasn't the only one paying attention to this place with his divine sense. Lord Daoist Jinghe, who was sitting on his dragon couch, muttered to himself, "This little girl isn't honest." The spiritual aura from the foundation-building pill exploded, but she actually withstood it so easily. She must have taken some other spiritual panaceas. Qin Shi, who was sitting on the side, cast a glance at her but didn't say anything. Emotienga clenched her teeth and endured the pain. She was obviously used to the medicinal power of the foundation-building pill, but her dantian still couldn't absorb it. She knew this was related to her aptitude. Martial Uncle Xianin once told her that the better her aptitude was, the faster her dantian could absorb spiritual aura. Therefore, whether she could successfully build her foundation or not depended on whether her dantian could adapt to this impact and absorb it for her own use. A month passed, but Emotienga was still resisting this intense pain. 2 months passed, and the impact slowly weakened. Her dantian also stabilized. 3 months passed, and the medicinal power of the foundation-building pill in Emotienga's body slowly subsided. Qin Jinghe sighed softly. "It's really a pity. A heaven-gifted person from the distant past era unexpectedly can't even pass this foundation-building hurdle." Qin Shi still didn't say anything, but the expression on his face definitely couldn't be considered happy. They both knew Emotienga failed to build her foundation this time. She withstood the pressure on her meridians, but she couldn't completely absorb the medicinal power of the foundation-building pill. Her dantian couldn't expand, so it couldn't withstand the spiritual aura of the foundation-building realm. "Brat, what are you thinking about?" Qin Shi sat still for a while before answering. If she had a cultivation technique from the distant past era, could she easily build her foundation, or even form her gold core or nascent soul? Qin Jinghe was stunned. "You're right, but I can't be sure. The environment in the distant past era is too different from today's. Cultivation techniques from the past might not be able to adapt to today's environment with spirit veins." 6 months passed, and Emotienga opened her eyes. The spiritual aura inside her body had completely calmed down, and her cultivation level couldn't advance. She knew she failed, but she only sighed softly. She didn't feel disappointed, or rather, she had long prepared herself for failure. With the aptitudes of 5 spiritual roots, it was very difficult to build her foundation in one go even if she had several kinds of miraculous pills and miraculous medicines. Luo Fengshue's older brother, whose aptitudes were countless times better than hers, still failed to build his foundation. Mo Tiange quickly pulled herself together. She frowned when she smelled the sour smell lingering around her body. She got up and went into the concocting room, took off her clothes, and soaked herself in the spring water. This was a more thorough marrow cleansing than when spiritual aura entered her body. Although she didn't succeed in building her foundation, the spiritual aura inside her body became purer, and there wasn't a single trace of impurities inside. If she wanted to build her foundation in the future, she wouldn't have to go through tendon changing and marrow cleansing. The spring water washed away the stains, and the spiritual aura cleansed her body, washing away the dirt. She felt her skin was like water, as if it could be broken by the slightest breeze. Even though she didn't really care about her appearance, Mo Tiange still felt happy. This foundation-building pill wasn't completely fruitless. She freshly put on her clothes, combed her hair, and stepped out of the cave. Outside the cave, Yi Jingwen and Luo Fengxue were talking about something. When they saw her coming out, they immediately turned to look at her. She called out with a smile, "Senior Martial Sister Luo, Big Brother Yi." After sizing her up, the two of them looked disappointed. Luo Fengxue grabbed Mo Tiange's hand as if she wanted to comfort her, but she hesitated and didn't say anything. Mo Tiange just patted her hand and smiled. Luo Fengxue succeeded in building her foundation, at least this was good news. Seeing her relaxed expression, Yi Jingwen also smiled. "Don't worry, there'll be more chances in the future." Mo Tiange nodded. "And, thank you, Big Brother Yi. I'll persevere." She then turned to Luo Fengxue and said with a smile, "Senior Martial Sister Luo, congratulations." Mo Tiange's reaction made Luo Fengxue sigh in relief, but her expression was still complicated. She wasn't happy because she felt it was a bit hurtful to rejoice in front of Mo Tiange, who had failed in building her foundation. Mo Tiange actually didn't care. She asked, "Senior Martial Sister Luo, is Martial Uncle Xianyin in his cave?" "He is," Luo Fengxue answered. "Master is waiting for you. Do you want to greet him first?" "Sure." With Luo Fengxue leading the way, the three of them soon reached Master Daoist Xuanyin's cave. Disciple greets Martial Uncle Xianyin. Disciple failed to build her foundation and disappointed Martial Uncle. Master Daoist Xianyin opened his eyes and looked her up and down. He then smiled and said, "Get up. Failure isn't scary. What's scary is losing confidence. It's good that you can persevere. Rest assured, Martial Uncle. Disciple won't be depressed because of this. And you should get ready. Grandmaster wants to see you." Was everyone very disappointed? Rest assured, success will come soon. Chapter 101. Mo Tiange stood in the main hall, carefully sizing up this palace-like Immortal's cave. Spirit jades were the stairs, strange stones were the pillars, dragons and phoenixes were carved, and immortal aura lingered around it. She was secretly amazed. Compared to this Immortal's cave, the Hall of Hu clan, the #1 clan in Tiandao sect, was nothing more than a rich man in the secular world. But what surprised her the most wasn't this palace, but the person sitting, or rather, lying on the dragon couch. It was a middle-aged man who looked a bit younger than Martial Uncle Xianyin. He had black hair, a short beard, gentle eyes, and a yellow crown and brocade robe, giving off an oppressive air of nobility. His face was about 50 to 60% similar to Qin Shi's, but his lazy and indulgent aura was completely different. At this moment, he was leaning on the dragon couch, surrounded by 2 foundation-building maids. One was holding tea while the other was massaging his shoulders. They were quiet and extremely gentle. Mo Tiange was puzzled. Why doesn't this Grandmaster Jinghe look like a nascent soul cultivator? Besides, Shenqing School is a Dao school. How could he have the tranquility and self-discipline of a Dao cultivator? Halfway through her thoughts, Emotienga suddenly felt a gaze sweeping over her from the dragon couch. She hastily lowered her head, and obediently brushed off her clothes before kneeling down. Disciple Emotienga greets Grandmaster. Qin Jinghe didn't answer. He took the tea from the maid's hands and waved them away. Emotienga could feel him sizing her up unhurriedly, so she took a deep breath. She was somewhat worried that this Grandmaster wouldn't be satisfied with her failure in building her foundation this time. If Grandmaster Jinghe no longer recognized her as his registered disciple, her position would definitely be awkward. Her heart was in a mess. After a long time, she heard Grandmaster Jinghe say faintly, "How do you feel about failing to build your foundation?" Emotienga paused. Although she just thought of this question, she didn't expect Grandmaster Jinghe would ask so directly. How should she answer? She pondered for a moment, then answered, "Disciple doesn't have any feelings." Qin Jinghe was a bit surprised and couldn't help but frown. If you don't have any feelings, doesn't that mean you don't have any plans? He frowned and released the power of a nascent soul cultivator. Even if it was unintentional, how could a small aura-refining disciple resist it? Emotienga tried her best to stabilize her mind and said, "Disciple didn't make any mistakes in my foundation-building process. I only lack talent. Disciple can't control talent, so I have no feelings and can only persevere." After she finished speaking, she felt her body lighten. Qin Jinghe pondered the matter for a moment, feeling rather amused. This little girl was really a bit interesting. She was just a little aura-refining cultivator, yet she was able to remain so calm and collected. Furthermore, she was even able to calmly answer under his spiritual aura pressure. It seemed her willpower was also very firm, that Brat's judgment of people was quite accurate. If she wasn't burdened by her aptitude, this child would definitely have some accomplishments. Qin smiled and said, "Grandmaster, and Qi. Mo, Qi and refining Qi and Mo, Grandmaster, and refining Qi." Qin Jinghe was still looking at her absent-mindedly, while Emotienga was obediently lowering her head. Qin yen qin. And Mo. And Xi and Mo mos Mo. And Mo. While she was lost in thought, Qin Jinghe suddenly asked, "What medicinal pills did you take when you built your foundation?" His question was simple, but Emotienga was shocked. When she built her foundation, aside from the heart-calming pill this Grandmaster gave her, she also took constitution-enhancing pills and foundation-refining pills. This Grandmaster actually asked her this question, so he must have noticed something. Emotienga thought quickly and answered, "Grandmaster, disciple took foundation-refining pills and constitution-enhancing pills." Qin Jinghe, who was drinking tea, paused and looked at her. "Foundation-refining pills and constitution-enhancing pills?" "Yes," Emotienga answered calmly. In that split second just now, she decided to tell him everything. In front of a nascent soul cultivator, she couldn't hide anything. If she tried to hide this matter and angered this Grandmaster, he might just take her life. So, it was better to be honest. At least, she was Grandmaster Jinghe's registered disciple now. If she took the initiative to give him the recipe for constitution-enhancing pills, he would have no reason to be angry with her. Constitution-enhancing pills? Qin Jinghe repeated and asked, "What are the effects of the foundation-refining pills and constitution-enhancing pills you mentioned? Where did you get them?" Emotienga lowered her gaze and answered honestly, "Disciple was in East Kunwa's Yunwu sect. There's a clan surnamed Jiang in Yunwu sect. This foundation-refining pill is the ancestral medicinal pill of Jiang clan. It's said that it can increase one's chances of building one's foundation. As for this constitution-enhancing pill, disciple happened to meet an aura-refining cultivator who had this pill recipe. That cultivator had a dispute with 2 other cultivators. Coincidentally, both of them were injured, so disciple obtained the pill recipe. This medicinal pill is used to enhance the effects of other medicinal pills, so disciple took it together with the foundation-building pill, hoping it could increase the efficacy of the foundation-building pill." After patiently listening to her explanation, Qin Jinghe's eyes lit up. Yes, it was the constitution-enhancing pill. He was obviously distracted and didn't have the mood to deal with her. You can go now. Later, I'll order someone to deliver the reward to you. Yes, disciple will take her leave. Wait. Xianxia stopped, trembling with fear. Grandmaster, do you have any other instructions? Qin Jinghe waved his hand. This is an important matter. Don't mention it to others. Yes. After leaving the cave, Xianxia touched her forehead and discovered it was covered in sweat. This Grandmaster Jinghe was rumored to be very easy to kill. If she hesitated and concealed it, she probably wouldn't have been able to leave this cave. However, he was also a very generous person. As long as she could win his favor, it would be very beneficial. Fortunately, she made the right bet. With 3 foundation-building pills, she, who had already tried to build her foundation once, would have a very high chance of building her foundation. As for this constitution-enhancing pill recipe, although she gave it to him, she already knew how to concoct it herself. It could be said that today, not only did she not suffer any losses, but she also gained Grandmaster Jinghe's favor, which greatly benefited her. Once Xianxia left, Qin Jinghe, who was in the main hall, burst into laughter without any care for his image. He looked at the jade slip in his hand complacently. Constitution-enhancing pill. Constitution-enhancing pill. With this, reaching the late stage of the nascent soul realm won't be wishful thinking anymore. Every cultivator in the cultivation world knew the importance of medicinal pills to cultivators. No matter how bad a person's aptitude was, if they ate medicinal pills like food, their cultivation progress wouldn't be much worse than those who were extremely talented but didn't accept medicinal pills. Unfortunately, the cost of medicinal pills wasn't something everyone could afford. Aura refining cultivators had it easier since medicinal pills weren't too expensive. The most common aura nourishing pill used by aura refining cultivators only cost 2 spirit stones. Therefore, if aura refining cultivators could cultivate in peace and had a certain amount of financial resources, most of them could cultivate until the 10th layer of the aura refining realm. However, if their cultivation level advanced by a large level, the cost of medicinal pills would increase by almost 100-fold. A basic medicinal pill used by foundation-building cultivators, soul-strengthening pills, cost 300 spirit stones. Therefore, most foundation-building cultivators were stuck in the early stage of the foundation-building realm. As for the core formation and nascent soul realms, it was even more awkward. Spiritual plants were hard to find and medicinal pills were hard to concoct. They often didn't have many medicinal pills to take in a year, so it was extremely difficult for them to cultivate only by absorbing spiritual aura. For aura refining cultivators, constitution-enhancing pills weren't very useful because they only took basic medicinal pills like aura-nourishing pills and aura-converging pills. If they took constitution-enhancing pills at the same time, they simply wouldn't be able to afford them. However, if they were given to core formation and nascent soul cultivators, they would be very useful. They could only take a few medicinal pills in a year, and the ingredients for constitution-enhancing pills weren't difficult for them. If every medicinal pill they took had a constitution-enhancing pill to increase its efficacy, the effects would be equivalent to having many more medicinal pills. The medicinal pills taken by nascent soul cultivators were all miraculous and spiritual pills. Qin Jinghe quickly calmed down and sent out a summoning talisman. A moment later, Qin Shi hurried over. As soon as he entered, he received the jade slip Qin Jinghe threw at him. For a moment, Qin Shi was puzzled. "Master, why did you call me here?" Qin Jinghe raised his chin and said proudly, "Take a look at this pill recipe." Puzzled, Qin Shi probed it with his divine sense. In the next second, he was gobsmacked. Where did this come from? Qin Jinghe finally burst into laughter. It was given to me by my newly accepted registered disciple. What do you think? How could this be? How come I didn't know about this? Qin Jinghe sat back on the dragon couch and said absent-mindedly, maybe she simply doesn't know how important this thing is. All right, quickly concoct this constitution-enhancing pill. After a while, I'll enter closed-door meditation. Qin Shi thought about it but didn't say anything. He didn't believe that Mo Tiange didn't know the importance of constitution-enhancing pills. She probably knew how important they were, so she didn't say anything. Master, Qin, she thought for a moment, then asked, what benefits did you give her? Qin Jinghe raised 3 fingers. 3 foundation-building pills. How about it? It's worth it, right? For other people, foundation-building pills were invaluable, but for nascent soul cultivators, they weren't worth anything at all. I understand. Qin, she put away the pill recipe and looked pensive. Chapter 102. Mo Tiange stared blankly at the 3 foundation-building pills rolling around on the tray. Soon after she presented the pill recipes, someone sent her a reward. It wasn't just the 3 foundation-building pills she promised, but there were also other treasures, medicinal pills, and spirit stones. The next day, another disciple sent her some things, including a bottle of freshly concocted constitution-enhancing pills of much better quality than hers. This time, it was an order from Martial Uncle Shoujing. In fact, these 2 rewards were more valuable than all of her belongings, so she didn't feel uncomfortable about the pill recipes being taken away. At least, the 2 people from Qin clan didn't take them by force and treated her really well. After thinking about it for a while, she packed up her things and walked towards Martial Uncle Xuanin's cave. She used her identity tablet to open the outermost formation. After being informed by a disciple guarding the door, Mo Tiange walked into the hall of Master Daoist Xuanin's cave. Wei Jiasi was also there, but she was expressionless when she saw her. Mo Tiange didn't mind and saluted Martial Uncle Xianin. Disciple Mo Tiange greets Martial Uncle Xianin. Master Daoist Xianin said with a kind expression, stand up. Thank you, Martial Uncle. Mo Tiange stood up and saluted Wei Jiasi. Senior Martial Sister Wei. Wei Jiasi's expression was indifferent. She responded coldly, then turned around to avoid looking at Mo Tiange. Mo Tiange didn't get angry. She just stood there obediently with her hands clasped. Master Daoist Xianin looked at her and asked gently, Tiange, did you come here for something? Yes, Mo Tiange said with her head lowered. 2 days ago, Disciple was bestowed foundation-building pills by Patriarch Jinghe. So Disciple came to ask Martial Uncle whether Disciple can immediately enter closed-door meditation. This. Master Daoist Xianin pondered for a moment, then asked, you've been in closed-door meditation for half a year. Do you feel tired? Mo Tiange shook her head. Disciple doesn't feel tired at all. I'm wholeheartedly thinking about building my foundation. Master Daoist Xianin said, normally, aura-refining cultivators with unstable minds shouldn't enter closed-door meditation for more than half a year, let alone enter closed-door meditation continuously. However, your mind is firm, so there shouldn't be any problems. If you want to enter closed-door meditation right now, that's fine. But to build your foundation, you have to be calm and your spiritual aura is unobstructed. Mo Tiange said happily, in that case, Disciple will continue her closed-door meditation tomorrow. With a smile on his face, Master Daoist Xianin nodded and said, you already know the steps to building your foundation, so there's no need to report to me. You can decide on your own. Yes, Disciple will take his leave. With his permission, Mo Tiange once again immersed herself in closed-door meditation, preparing to break through to the foundation-building realm. She still had 1 foundation-refining pill left from Jiang Qingxian. Last time, she only managed to concoct 2 constitution-enhancing pills and used 1. Fortunately, among the things Martial Uncle Shoujing sent her, there was a bottle of constitution-enhancing pills she had just concocted. Once everything was ready, Mo Tiange informed Luo Fengxue and Yi Jingwen, who could be considered her friends, that she was going to enter closed-door meditation again. Yi Jingwen rushed over before she entered closed-door meditation and warned her in detail. Luo Fengxue promised to take good care of her medicinal fields while she was in closed-door meditation. Once all the chores were taken care of, Mo Tiange once again closed the cave. Perhaps to other people, entering closed-door meditation to build her foundation only a few days after failing to build her foundation might be a bit too impatient, but Mo Tiange was very calm. In fact, During the last 3 months of her closed-door meditation, she already knew she failed to build her foundation. However, she still used the medicinal power of the foundation-building pill to cleanse the spiritual aura in her body, so she didn't feel impatient. With a calm mind, Xianxia closed her eyes and once again immersed herself in the world of cultivation. The peaks of Mount Taikang were full of spiritual aura. This place was right next to Master Daoist Xuanin's Immortal's cave, so the spiritual aura here was even more overflowing. Xianxia slowly operated the spiritual aura in her body. Starting from her dantian, the spiritual aura flowed through her meridians and finally returned to her dantian. Next to her, the spiritual aura gathered bit by bit and rushed into her body, gradually submerging into her meridians. The Yin's spiritual aura inside her body circulated smoothly. Although she absorbed a lot of spiritual aura, it didn't increase in the slightest. The spiritual aura circulated through her body once before gradually dissipating. The peak stage of the aura refining realm meant that if she didn't build her foundation, her cultivation level wouldn't increase anymore. Nevertheless, she wasn't anxious at all. She just slowly controlled her spiritual aura, moving it in a big circle over and over again until her whole body became accustomed to this kind of repeated cycle. She didn't know how much time had passed, but she felt as if her whole body had become a universe. She began to swallow the auxiliary medicinal pills one by one, and finally, the first foundation-building pill. The spiritual aura inside her body once again skyrocketed, and her meridians cracked inch by inch. However, this time, her expression didn't change in the slightest. She still steadily followed her original pace, controlling the world inside her body bit by bit, absolutely not changing because of external factors. That powerful force gradually dissolved into the Yin's spiritual aura and was even assimilated step by step. When this spiritual aura gradually weakened, she almost didn't think twice and once again swallowed a foundation-building pill and a constitution-enhancing pill at the same time. The two divine senses paying attention to her were both startled. They almost wanted to order her to stop immediately, but when they saw that she was still calmly operating her spiritual aura, they finally gave up. If the first foundation-building pill was like a gale blowing inside her body, then this time, it was like a monstrous wave surging to the sky. These waves came crashing down, hitting her meridians solidly, but she remained motionless. She did not block them, but rather merged herself into them, drifting along with them. She waited until she gradually grasped the pulse within, then slowly seized control of her own body. After she took the third foundation-building pill and the constitution-enhancing pill, the gradually calming waves turned into overflowing seawater that washed away everything, drowned everything, and completely surrounded the Yin's spiritual aura as if it wanted to swallow it whole. However, she still calmly and persistently operated this weak spiritual aura, slowly driving it and slowly swallowing it. After an unknown amount of time, this spiritual aura was finally swallowed and turned into a huge river, gradually widening her meridians. In the end, like 100 rivers flowing into the sea, it rushed towards her dantian. At this moment, a strange scene appeared in Clear Spring Peak. Countless spiritual aura, as if it was being pulled, rushed towards a certain place. Countless Clear Spring Peak disciples came out of their Immortal's caves and saw this spiritual aura turning from invisible to tangible until it converged at a certain place. Several clouds leisurely floated over and stopped above that Immortal's cave. They intertwined with the spiritual aura, gradually interweaving to form a rainbow bridge. Core formation. Someone has formed her gold core. A disciple who had seen his sect's elders form their gold core shouted, attracting the attention of other disciples. Spiritual aura converged, and auspicious clouds loomed. One after another, the core formation elders of Mount Taikang also came out of their Immortal's caves to observe this scene. Clear Spring Peak was filled with people. Countless people rushed towards the Immortal's cave located halfway up the mountain. At this time, a person appeared in midair. With his hands clasped behind his back, he looked at the crowd below and shouted, "Disciples of Clear Spring Peak, return to your Immortal's caves. No delays." His voice was clear and melodious as if it was right next to their ears. When the disciples saw the figure standing in midair, they saluted and obeyed his order. Nevertheless, they still started discussing in twos and threes. Junior martial brother Shoujing. Core formation cultivators from other peaks rushed over and asked, "What's going on? It seems like someone formed his gold core, but his momentum is somewhat lacking. Could it be that the disciples of your clear spring peak are practicing some kind of secret technique?" Xianxia answered faintly, "Senior martial brothers, you don't need to be surprised. A disciple of my clear spring peak is just building his foundation." Building his foundation? These cultivators were even more surprised when they heard the answer. How can a foundation building trigger a celestial phenomenon and a spiritual aura vortex appear? I'm still paying attention to this matter. If there's any news, I'll tell you in detail. This isn't normal. Master Daoist Xianxia flew over and greeted the core formation cultivators surrounding Xianxia. He then said with a heavy voice, "Senior martial brothers and junior martial brothers, Junior martial brother Shoujing and I will pay close attention to this matter. You should go back first to avoid causing panic among the disciples." His words finally made the core formation cultivators stop asking questions. After a short discussion, they left on their own. Xianxia and Master Daoist Xianxia landed in front of Immortal's Immortal's cave. Both of them had grave expressions on their faces. "Junior martial brother Shoujing, in your opinion, why is this happening?" Xianxia was silent for a long time before he slowly said, "Several hundred years ago, a spiritual beast from the distant past era awakened in a 10,000-year-old glacier. At that time, auspicious clouds gathered in the sky and thunder rumbled like a celebration." Master Daoist Xianxia was startled. "You mean?" Xianxia shook his head. "I'm not sure. However, a spiritual beast from the distant past era that looked ordinary was able to trigger such a celestial phenomenon. Presumably, it's because of the difference in their realms." Master Daoist Xianxia pondered for a long time, but he still didn't understand. Even if that's the case, the cultivation technique she practices is from the present era. It has nothing to do with the distant past era. She didn't continue to talk about this matter. He only said, "Let's wait and see. When she comes out of her closed-door meditation, we'll know what's going on." However, the amount of time they had to wait exceeded their expectations. Half a year had passed, but Immortal still hadn't come out of her closed-door meditation. She was like a silkworm spinning a cocoon, sitting cross-legged in her Immortal's cave without any awareness. The Immortal's cave was filled with spiritual aura that had almost turned into liquid, while her surroundings were densely wrapped within spiritual aura. Layer by layer, the Yin's spiritual aura almost solidified and wrapped her tightly. A year had passed, and Master Daoist Xianxia was already somewhat impatient. Cultivators usually needed several months to half a year to build their foundation. When the celestial phenomenon erupted, Immortal had already been in closed-door meditation for almost half a year. In total, she had been in closed-door meditation for a whole year and a half. No one in Xianxia school had ever needed such a long time to build their foundation. A year and a half had passed. Even the head Grand Supreme Elder of the school had come to ask why this disciple had needed such a long time to build her foundation. 2 years had passed. She stood in front of the Immortal's cave in silence. In the beginning, they could still use their divine senses to investigate the situation inside the Immortal's cave, but later, it seemed as if there was a dense layer of spiritual aura inside that even the divine senses of core formation cultivators like them couldn't penetrate. Now, they simply didn't know what the situation inside was like. They could only vaguely feel that the person inside was still alive. During a foundation building process, bystanders absolutely couldn't disturb them. Otherwise, at best, they would be seriously injured. At worst, their cultivation levels would regress. When he was free, he came here to stand for a while, but he didn't know when the door of the Immortal's cave would open. He raised his head and looked at the clouds above. The spiritual aura above condensed into a rainbow bridge with spiritual birds flying in the air. It was as beautiful as a fairyland. All of a sudden, the rainbow bridge moved. In an instant, the clouds and fog dispersed, and the spiritual birds flew up, disappearing without a trace. It was as if the scene just now was an illusion. His brows twitched. He turned his head and stared at the stone door in front of him. The spiritual aura inside the Immortal's cave was also rapidly dissipating. In less than a quarter of an hour, it had completely dispersed. Almost none of the disciples of Clear Spring Peak noticed that the scenery that had been there for more than a year had quietly disappeared. The stone door finally opened. A person slowly walked out with a smile on his face. Chapter 103. Clear Spring Peak disciple Mo Tiange, Lord Daoist Jinghe's registered disciple, advanced to the foundation building realm at the age of 23. After recording these words in the disciple register, the foundation building cultivator in charge of the school administration handed her a jade tablet and said with a smile, "Congratulations on advancing to the foundation building realm, junior martial sister Mo. This is your new tablet." Mo Tiange took it and said politely, "Thank you, senior martial brother." The foundation building cultivator explained in detail, "Since junior martial sister advanced to the foundation building realm, you can change the tools in your Immortal's cave. However, your Grandmaster Jinghe's registered disciple, so your Immortal's cave isn't managed by the steward's hall. Junior martial sister, please ask your master about this matter. As for the tools, you can get them together. Junior martial sister, take the tablet and go to the back hall to find Steward Lu." "Thank you." Mo Tiange went to the back hall, found a steward, and took some clothes and tools before leaving the steward's hall. Holding the foundation building disciple's tablet, Mo Tiange looked up at the sky and felt like she was dreaming. Even with 3 foundation building pills, she wasn't sure she could build her foundation. She just tried her best with faith, and fortunately, she succeeded. With her spiritual aura circulating, her body seemed weightless and she flew steadily in the air. Aura refining disciples could only use light body techniques and some spirit tools that could increase their speed. They couldn't use flying magic tools or fly for long periods of time, so they were only a bit stronger than mortals. Foundation building cultivators, on the other hand, had enough spiritual aura to operate flying magic tools and fly in the air. No wonder people said foundation building was the real threshold of cultivation. Because riding a sword and flying thousands of miles in a flash was the real means of immortals. A cool breeze blew in her face, and the mountains and rivers were all in her sight. She stood in the air and thought, if second uncle knew, he'd be very happy, right? She finally built her foundation and crossed the threshold of cultivation. In the future, she would walk step by step until she reached the core formation realm, the nascent soul realm, and even ascended. Although she didn't know which step she could reach, she would persist until the last moment. With a faint smile, she slowly flew back to her cave. As soon as she came out of her closed-door meditation in her cave, she saw Qin Shi. When she found out she actually spent more than 2 years in closed-door meditation, and when she learned she actually triggered a celestial phenomenon similar to core formation, she was even more shocked. She really didn't think her foundation building could be compared to core formation. Aside from the longer time it took, there was no other difference in the process. After she built her foundation building, the spiritual aura inside her body also didn't have any abnormalities, so how could it have triggered celestial phenomena? It should be noted that only those who advanced to the core formation stage or above could trigger celestial phenomena. Those who advanced to the foundation building stage could, at most, cause some fluctuations of spiritual energy. Qin Shi just told her not to think too much about it. Martial Uncle Xianxia happened to be in closed-door meditation these past few days, so she had to deal with some chores first and wait for Martial Uncle Xianxia to finish his closed-door meditation before going to see him. Mo Tiange changed her identity tablet, took a new set of sect clothes and some foundation-building rewards. She also thanked Yi Jingwen and Luo Fengxue for taking care of her for the past 2 years before returning to her cave. In any case, it was a fact that she had reached the foundation-building stage. She should properly think about some matters in the future. The first problem was the cultivation method. She originally practiced the art of Sunu and Greenwood art. Although Greenwood art could be practiced until the core formation realm, it was very difficult for it to display its full power against foundation-building cultivators. Her purpose in practicing greenwood art was to make up for the art of Sunu's lack of power in fights of magical powers, so she might as well give up on it. However, if she gave up on the greenwood spell, she would have to learn a new divine power to use in fights of magical powers. The second problem was magic tools. Aura refining cultivators used spirit tools while foundation building cultivators used magic tools. Compared to spirit tools, magic tools were usually 10 times more powerful. Now that she had built her foundation, she naturally had to change all her spirit tools into magic tools. In fact, she also had a lot of magic tools. Most of them were left behind by second uncle. Some of them were awarded to her by Grandmaster Jinghe and martial uncle Shoujing before she built her foundation. The other two magic tools were the Heaven and Earth Cloud Silk Armor and the Land Fleeing Ruler. When she left Mount Yunwu, she stole them in passing and gave them to her. However, although she had a lot of magic tools, most of them were auxiliary and defensive types. Second uncle's magic tools weren't suitable for her, so she could only look for other magic tools. In addition, her Qianquan bag still contained the carcass of the second-rank iron-teethed crocodile she killed in Yunwu. In the future, she could take it and ask someone to make it into a magic tool. The last problem was medicinal pills. Foundation building medicinal pills weren't as easy to obtain as aura refining medicinal pills. Even though she was now an elite disciple, it was still impossible for her to eat them like before. Before she could figure out how to solve this problem, Luo Fengxue told her that martial uncle Xianyin already came out of his closed-door meditation. Mo Tiange temporarily put these matters aside and went to see him first. Upon entering martial uncle Xuanin's Immortal's cave, Mo Tiange discovered that this time, everyone was present. Not only were the two senior martial sisters present, but several senior martial brothers were also present. These senior martial brothers were very diligent in their cultivation. Mo Tiange had been at Xianqing school for a long time, but she still hadn't met some of them. Disciple Mo Tiange greets martial uncle Xianyin. Master Daoist Xianyin was still smiling. He raised his hand and said, "Stand up." Mo Tiange stood up and said respectfully, "Disciple finished building her foundation and came to report to martial uncle." Master Daoist Xianyin nodded with a smile. "I already know. You're very good. Come forward and let me take a look." Mo Tiange walked forward. Master Daoist Xianyin reached out and held her pulse. A wisp of spiritual aura instantly entered her body and examined her meridians one by one. After a long time, Master Daoist Xianyin released her hand with a slight frown on his face. Mo Tiange, who was a bit worried, asked cautiously, "Martial uncle, is there a problem?" Master Daoist Xianyin shook his head and said, "There's no problem at all. You already know about the phenomenon that occurred when you built your foundation, right?" "Then, did you feel it yourself?" Mo Tiange shook her head. "Disciple lost consciousness after that. I basically didn't know it took me 2 years. So that's what happened?" Master Daoist Xianyin pondered for a moment but didn't say anything. He said to her, "Let's talk about this later." Seeing that martial uncle Xianyin had something to deal with, Mo Tiange obediently stood to the side without saying anything else. "Qingyu." Upon hearing her name being called, Han Qingyu stood up and said, "Master, this is an important matter. Take several junior martial brothers and sisters with you. If there's nothing, that's fine. If there's something, quickly come back and report to me." "I understand, Master." Master Daoist Xianyin then turned towards the other disciples. He stroked his beard and muttered to himself for a moment before saying, "Shernan Hifeng, Thie, the 3 of you follow eldest martial sister." "Yes, Master." "All right, you can all go back. Tinga, you stay." "Yes, martial uncle." As she watched her fellow disciples leaving one by one, Mo Tiange muttered inwardly. Could it be that something big happened? Martial uncle Xianyin actually sent 4 disciples at once? She didn't have much time to think because Master Daoist Xianyin already said to her, "Tiange, although you're not my disciple, you respect me as your master. Now that you've built your foundation, martial uncle will naturally give you some rewards." Mo Tiange said, "Disciple was able to build my foundation thanks to martial uncle's guidance. I don't dare to ask for any rewards. Master Daoist Xianxia stroked his beard and said with a smile, "You don't need to refuse. Every disciple who builds their foundation will get a reward, not just you." After pondering for a moment, he continued to say, "Let me ask you, is the cultivation technique you practice inferior in fights of magical power after building your foundation?" Tiange was slightly shocked. As expected of a core formation cultivator. She hadn't even said anything, but he already sensed it. She answered, "Yes, Martial Uncle's eyes are like torches. I practice 2 cultivation techniques. One of them is beneficial for cultivation, but it doesn't have any great divine power. As for the other one, its power is greatly reduced after building my foundation." Master Daoist Xianxia nodded slightly and stood up. "That being the case, I'll pick a cultivation technique for you. Come with me." "Yes, Martial Uncle." Tiange followed Master Daoist Xianxia out of the hall. After making many turns and passing through some restrictions, they finally entered a small collection room. As soon as they entered the collection room, Tiange saw several wooden shelves with many books, jade slips, and the like on them. Master Daoist Xianxia said, "Martial Uncle has never seen a female cultivator with a pure Yin constitution, so I don't know the characteristics of the cultivation technique you practice. I can't pick the most suitable cultivation technique for you, so I can only pick a few roughly." Tiange lowered her head and said, "Martial Uncle is so attentive. Disciple is overwhelmed by the favor." Master Daoist Xianxia had a very good impression of this junior's politeness, so he didn't say anything more. After pondering for a while, he picked several books and jade slips and handed them to her. "Take a look. What do you think of these?" Tiange took them and carefully looked at them. These were all cultivation techniques for fights of magical power. They didn't require special cultivation and didn't have high requirements for spiritual roots. However, the shortcoming was that they weren't very powerful and would be useless once one reached the core formation realm. Nevertheless, since this martial uncle put them in the collection room, they certainly weren't ordinary cultivation techniques. The most important thing was that they were suitable for her. Tiange hesitated for a while before she raised her head and asked, "Martial Uncle Xianxia, do you have any cultivation techniques that can be used with magic tools? Disciple feels that if we only talk about power, perhaps that one would be a bit stronger." Master Daoist Xianxia nodded. "What you said is very reasonable. Regarding magic tools, junior martial brother Shoujing asked me to give them to you. Since you asked, I'll give them to you first." As he spoke, Master Daoist Xianxia took out an object from his Qinquan bag and held it in his hand. This object is called the Shuttle of Flying Apsara. It's a shape-shifting object and contains an illusory formation. However, using this object isn't a cultivation technique, but a formation. Since you're good at formations, I presume it's suitable for you. Tiange took a closer look at the Shuttle of Flying Apsara. The Shuttle of Flying Apsara had 2 pointed ends and was made of an unknown material. Although it was only the size of a palm, it was brimming with spiritual aura, so it was certainly not an ordinary object. Master Daoist Xianxia gave the Shuttle of Flying Apsara and a jade slip to her. "Although you have this object, you still have to choose a cultivation technique for fights of magical powers. Otherwise, if you rely too much on magic tools, you'll be at the mercy of others. How about this? Martial Uncle will make the decision on your behalf. This soul-refining art cultivates the primordial spirit, so it's extremely powerful. I originally thought this technique was difficult to practice and wasn't suitable for you, but since you're determined to cultivate magic tools first, I'll give it to you to practice slowly. This cultivation technique isn't easy to practice and can easily lead to cultivation deviation, so I don't dare to give it to other disciples. However, since you have a pure Yin constitution, the chances of you suffering from cultivation deviation are lower than others, so presumably, it won't be too big of a problem." "Yes, Martial Uncle." Tiange accepted the other cultivation technique Master Daoist Xianxia gave her. After skimming through it, she was immediately overjoyed. This cultivation technique clearly stated that one could only practice it after they built their foundation. Moreover, it could be practiced until the nascent soul realm. It was a high-level cultivation technique. If she practiced it diligently, it would definitely become her trump card. After leading Mo Tiange out of the collection room, Master Daoist Xianyin gave her a flying sword and a bottle of medicinal pills. He said, "Since your martial uncle Shoujing already gave you magic tools, I'll give you a flying sword. As for this medicinal pill, it's a soul-strengthening pill for foundation-building cultivators. It's your disciple's portion, 1 bottle every year. Foundation-building medicinal pills are much rarer than aura-refining medicinal pills, so I hope you treasure them well." Chapter 104. Mo Tiange stared at the shuttle of flying apsara in her hand. It was similar to the shuttles used to weave cloth in the secular world, but it was a bit bigger. It was thick and round in the middle and pointed at both ends. She didn't know where it was made from, but it shone with a golden light and was impervious to heat and cold. A rustling sound came from the forest, and a first-rank spiritual beast appeared in front of her in a daze. Mo Tiange smiled. This little thing really came at the right time. She raised her hand, and the shuttle of flying apsara turned into a golden light that soared into the sky. The small spirit beast that resembled a squirrel raised its head and stared at the flashing golden light with its beady black eyes. To its surprise, it discovered that the streak of golden light had transformed into hundreds of tiny golden streaks that were arranged in a circular formation around it. The little spiritual beast seemed to have just realized the danger. It shrank its head, swung its tail, and turned around, wanting to jump away. However, the countless golden rays had already sealed off all of its escape routes. No matter how it tried to jump, it couldn't escape. The little guy was anxious. It bared its teeth and clapped its hands. A scorching hot spiritual energy rushed out and actually caused the golden rays to tremble. Mo Tiange was stunned. She pressed her hand down, and the golden lights scattered and gathered again, pressing down on the little fellow. No matter how the little fellow struggled, it couldn't jump out. When it finally felt a bit tired, Mo Tiange shook her hand and tied it up with a rope. She withdrew the shuttle of flying apsara, walked forward, and picked up the little spiritual beast. The little spiritual beast bared its teeth at her and struggled angrily. Mo Tiange didn't care at all. She rummaged through her Qiankuan bag, took out a spiritual beast bag, and put it inside. Once she was done, she released her flying sword and flew back to her cave on Clear Spring Peak. Originally, she just wanted to test the power of the shuttle of flying apsara, but she unexpectedly caught an interesting little thing. This little thing obviously knew a very advanced fire element spell. Although its power wasn't great, it wasn't ordinary fire. Mo Tiange landed outside her cave and happened to see Luo Fengxue coming back. She called out, "Senior Martial Sister Luo?" Luo Fengxue wiped her face and came over. "Tiange, did you go out?" Mo Tiange nodded, opened her cave, and let Luo Fengxue in. Luo Fengxue, who looked exhausted, walked into her cave and sat motionlessly on a stone chair. Mo Tiange carefully looked at her expression and asked, "Senior Martial Sister Luo, what's wrong?" With great difficulty, Luo Fengxue lifted her spirits and sighed. "I've been busy for more than 10 days. I haven't rested." Mo Tiange was surprised. Mo Tiange knew Luo Fengxue wasn't an ascetic cultivator. Instead, she was passionate about management. After she built her foundation, she was promoted to steward of the steward's hall. But she knew that deacons didn't have to be busy every single day, and all the minor matters were handled by deacons and disciples, and she only had to oversee the deacon's hall on normal days. So what could possibly make her so busy? Senior Martial Sister Luo, did something big happen in the sect? Luo Fengxue rubbed her brows and said weakly, "Do you still remember when eldest martial sister took several senior martial brothers and sisters out of the sect a month ago?" Fengxue said. It was something that happened when she went to see martial uncle Xianyin after she built her foundation. At that time, martial uncle Xianyin asked her eldest martial sister, Han Qingyu, to take her 3 senior martial brothers and sisters with her. Mo, after her, she said, went and she and went. A few months ago, there seemed to be some movement in the southern forest. Eldest senior sister and the others went to investigate, but after they left, there was no news of them. What? Emo Tienga was astonished. Luo Fengxue nodded. Eldest martial sister and the others aren't the only ones who went missing. This time, other disciples sent by martial uncles and martial uncles from other peaks also disappeared without a trace. Even though Emo Tienga wasn't involved in the matters of the school, she knew how important this matter was. The 17 foundation-building cultivators were all elite disciples. If all of them died, it would be a big loss even for a large cultivation group like Xianxia School. Although there were more than 500 foundation establishment cultivators in the sect, they were the cream of the crop. They were the ones with the highest possibility of reaching core formation. Over the past dozen or so days, we've contacted the other sects, and we discovered that the other 6 great system-allocated sects are also in the same situation. Only then did everyone realize that this matter is not as simple as it seems. Luo Fengxue rubbed her reddened eyes, then said to Emo Tienga, "Tienga, you don't have to worry. This matter will be handled by the sect's elders, so it won't affect us. Alright, I'll go take a rest first. That's all for now." Rest well, senior martial sister. Luo Fengxue waved her hand and returned to her immortal's cave while rubbing her eyes. Emo Tienga didn't think too much about it. Just like Luo Fengxue said, this kind of matter didn't need them, foundation-building disciples, to worry about. The elders would handle it. She opened the spiritual beast bag and released the little spiritual beast. Once the little thing came out of the spiritual beast bag, it blinked its black eyes and stared at her as if it was begging. Emo Tienga then pulled the rope that was tied to its body away. Once the little thing regained its freedom, it immediately turned around and ran towards the entrance of the cave. Emo Tienga raised her hand, and the shuttle of flying Apsara was launched once again. A golden light enveloped it completely. Ooh! The little thing knew how powerful the shuttle of flying Apsara was, so it immediately turned around and begged for mercy. Emo Tienga retrieved the shuttle of flying Apsara and said, "If you don't run, I won't tie you up." The little thing seemed to understand her words. It sat with its hind legs together and put its 2 front legs together, making a begging gesture. Emo Tienga couldn't help but find it funny. She opened her hand and retrieved the shuttle of flying Apsara. The little thing stared at the stone door reluctantly, but in the end, it still slowly slipped back. Spiritual beasts were quite sensitive to dangerous things, and this little thing could naturally feel it. Emo Tienga's strength was far superior to it, so it couldn't run away and could only submit. Seeing that the little thing was obedient, Emo Tienga waved her hand. It had glossy brown fur, shiny black eyes, and a very large tail. It looked a bit like a squirrel, but Emo Tienga recognized it. It was a small spiritual beast called the Inferno Beast. This kind of spiritual beast generally couldn't cultivate to a very high level, but it was born with fire techniques. Its fire wasn't ordinary fire, but ardent yang real fire. It was a kind of innate real fire that was even purer than the Dantian real fire of foundation-building cultivators. It was excellent for concocting medicinal pills and refining tools. Emo Tienga picked the little thing up, stroked its fur and said, "Be good, and I'll help you cultivate. If I form my gold core one day, I'll let you go." The little thing's eyes brightened as it stared at her. "Looks like you agree." Emo Tienga smiled and put it on the ground. She took out a few aura-nourishing pills she no longer had any use for it and gave them to it. "I'll give you a name. Since you're an inferno beast, I'll call you Xiaohua." The little thing swallowed the aura-nourishing pills in one gulp, then raised its head and let out 2 sounds as if it was protesting her completely uncreative name. Emo Tienga smiled, completely unmoved. "I didn't ask whether you agree or not. In any case, you'll be called Xiaohua. Come here, you'll live here from now on. You can play in the small valley behind, but you're not allowed to make trouble. If you're not obedient, I'll put you in the spiritual beast bag." The little thing let out 2 woo sounds again. Emo Tienga patted it and gave it a few more aura-nourishing pills. She put it in the spiritual beast room and returned to the cultivation room to meditate. Only after entering the foundation-building realm did she realize how useless her spiritual roots were. When she was in the aura-refining realm, she ate medicinal pills in the spirit-gathering formation, so her cultivation didn't grow any slower than elite disciples. But now that she was in the foundation-building realm, even if she took medicinal pills, her progress wouldn't be as obvious as when she was in the aura-refining realm. This month, she couldn't cultivate properly, so the growth of her spiritual aura was minimal, so she had to stop. If she continued to cultivate at this speed, even if she used up the remaining 300 years of her lifespan, she still wouldn't be able to form her gold core. Therefore, when she saw this inferno beast, she was tempted. As it turned out, she concocted medicinal pills only for the sake of constitution-enhancing pills. Now that the pill recipe for constitution-enhancing pills had been given to Grandmaster Jinghe and martial uncle Shoujing sent her a bottle of constitution-enhancing pills every once in a while, she originally planned to give up on concocting medicinal pills. But now that she realized her aptitude was so useless, she had no choice but to pick up her pill-concocting skills. Tiange sighed, then closed her eyes and began to cultivate. She already tested the power of the shuttle of flying Apsara. Martial uncle Xianxia said this thing could transform and contain an illusory formation. Indeed, this thing could attack and defend. It was indeed a first-class magic tool. In addition, martial uncle Xianxia repeatedly warned her about the soul-refining art, telling her to cultivate it slowly and not to rush it. Although cultivating the soul-refining art was very risky, it was indeed very powerful. The soul-refining art was a cultivation technique that specialized in cultivating primordial spirits. It could directly launch attacks against primordial spirits, which had always been the weakest part of cultivators. If she succeeded in cultivating it, the power of this cultivation technique would be extraordinary. Primordial spirits were, in fact, what mortals referred to as souls. Humans were born with souls, but cultivators cultivated their bodies and souls, eventually forming their primordial spirits. Divine sense was derived from primordial spirits. Under normal circumstances, primordial spirits were hidden deep in the sea of knowledge in the Dantian, so divine sense couldn't attack them. On the contrary, it was easy to be injured. Ordinary cultivation techniques also strengthened divine sense, but they only made divine sense more sensitive and covered a wider area. This soul-refining art, on the other hand, cultivated primordial spirits so that divine sense would have the power to attack. Tiange didn't dare to say there weren't other cultivation techniques that cultivated primordial spirits, but she was certain that very few people cultivated them. The reason was very simple. It was precisely because of the risk of suffering from chi deviation, as martial uncle Xianxia said. Every cultivator knew how fragile primordial spirits were. When cultivating primordial spirits, if one didn't grasp the right amount, it was very likely that one's primordial spirit would be damaged, resulting in serious injuries. If it was a nascent soul cultivator, it wouldn't be a big deal. After all, nascent soul cultivators had fused their primordial spirit and gold core into one, forming their nascent soul, so their primordial spirits wouldn't be that fragile. However, for cultivators below the core formation realm, if their primordial spirits were damaged, their cultivation levels would greatly regress. Because of this, martial uncle Xianxia didn't give her this cultivation technique from the very beginning. Later on, he even repeatedly warned her not to be greedy. However, other people were other people. Tiange, who cultivated this soul-refining art, had a few advantages compared to others: her pure yin constitution and originally extremely poor aptitude. Pure yin constitution meant that yin and yang wouldn't clash, and spiritual roots of the origin could balance each other out. The so-called chi deviation occurred when one cultivated a cultivation technique that destroyed the balance inside their body. Tiange had a pure yin constitution, so she wouldn't have any yin and yang imbalance. Furthermore, she also had spiritual roots of the origin, so there was a small circulation inside her body. Because of that, she could be said to be blessed by nature when she practiced this technique. As long as she wasn't greedy and was cautious, the possibility of her chi deviation was very small. However, cultivating this technique was really not easy. Cultivating primordial spirits naturally had to start with the primordial spirit, but primordial spirits were extremely fragile, so they could only be strengthened slowly. Tiange had been cultivating for about a month, but she still hadn't made any progress. Her cultivation level hadn't advanced, And she didn't have a clue about the cultivation technique either. Mo Tiange realized that after entering the foundation building realm, her future was very bleak. Chapter 105. The Inferno Beast was a kind of spiritual beast that was easy to raise. It didn't need special food or a good environment. It could be raised casually. This kind of small spiritual beast wasn't rare in Kunwu. Low-level cultivators liked to catch one or two to concoct medicinal pills or refine tools, so Mo Tiange wasn't worried about how to raise it. After catching the little Inferno Beast, Mo Tiange raised it in the spiritual beast room and in the small valley behind her cave. In any case, there weren't many things in her cave, and the medicinal fields in the valley were also covered with restrictions. At most, the little fellow could only gnaw on the turf and wouldn't cause much trouble. When it was hungry, she fed it with aura pills. When it was thirsty, there was a spring in the valley. Moreover, without any natural enemies, the little fellow grew round very quickly. After a month, she had some clues about the soul-refining art, and the Inferno Beast no longer had any resistance towards her, so Mo Tiange started to concoct medicinal pills. The basic medicinal pills for foundation-building cultivators were soul-strengthening pills. She had already concocted constitution-enhancing pills, so it wasn't difficult. However, the spiritual plants needed weren't as cheap as the medicinal pills for aura-refining cultivators. After spending several thousand spirit stones, she only bought 100 sets of raw materials. Fortunately, she now had the allowance of an elite disciple. In addition to her original several thousand spirit stones, she could afford it. After catching the Inferno Beast and bringing it to the concocting room, Mo Tiange closed her door and immersed herself in studying pill concocting. Several months passed in a hurry. One day, she suddenly heard the ringing of a bell outside. Only then did she realize that a long time had passed. Mo Tiange stopped concocting and walked out of her cave. She happened to run into Wei Jiasi, who was walking out with a worried expression. Mo Tiange stepped forward to greet her. "Senior Martial Sister Wei, what happened?" Wei Jiasi shook her head and answered faintly, "I just heard the bell, so I naturally didn't know. This bell is used to summon disciples. Disciples from every peak have to go to the main peak when they hear it. You'll know when you get there." Wei Jiasi no longer looked at Mo Tiange and flew towards the main peak on her flying magic tool. Mo Tiange looked around. Han Qingyu hadn't returned since she disappeared, and Luo Fengshue's cave was also quiet. She was probably in the steward's hall. Mo Tiange didn't know anyone else, so she also flew towards the main peak on her flying sword. At this very moment, all the disciples on the mountain were busy, but they weren't in a mess. Disciples in the foundation building realm and above were riding their flying magic tools, while aura-refining disciples were riding the 10,000 miles cloud shared by each peak, rushing towards the main peak. As Mo Tiange watched, she couldn't help but sigh inwardly. This was the demeanor of a famous and big cultivation group. These disciples suddenly encountered a problem, but they didn't panic at all. Several thousand disciples acted in an orderly manner. Presumably, even if something happened, they wouldn't be the slightest bit flustered when dealing with it. Once she arrived at the main peak, she looked down and saw that the square was already full of people. Several dozen core formation cultivators and 2 nascent soul grandmasters were standing at the entrance of the main hall of the 3 pure ones with solemn expressions on their faces. Mo Tiange quickly found the place where the foundation building disciples were standing. She landed her flying sword and stood there solemnly. There were more than 10 core formation cultivators and 2 nascent soul grandmasters. She didn't believe that nothing serious had happened. Could it be related to Senior Sister Han's disappearance? Although Mo Tiange had been concocting medicinal pills in seclusion for several months, she knew there was no news of Senior Sister Han after she disappeared. Several martial uncles left the mountain to look for her, but they didn't find any clues. She occasionally went to see Martial Uncle Xianin, but he always looked worried. The square was gradually filled with people. When all the disciples returned to their positions, an old nascent soul Daoist who was leading the group glanced at them. A core formation cultivator stepped forward and shouted, "Disciples, be quiet." His voice wasn't very loud, but it could be heard clearly in every corner. The disciples who were originally whispering to each other immediately stopped talking. The core formation cultivator's expression was solemn. He said in a deep voice, "I summoned all the disciples here because I have something to tell you. Several months ago, there were abnormal movements of demonic beasts in the southern forest. We sent elite disciples to investigate, but unexpectedly, all of them went missing. To avoid chaos, this matter has never been announced. In the past few months, we've received news that a lot of disciples outside have gone missing, so we summoned everyone to seal the mountain." Once he said this, the square went into an uproar. Although many disciples hadn't experienced the mountain sealing order, they had heard of it. The so-called mountain sealing order was to activate the Great Mountain Protecting Formation, close the mountain gate, and no longer receive visitors. Disciples were also only allowed to enter but not leave. Apart from those who received the order, they were cut off from the outside world. Tiange had been concocting medicinal pills in seclusion for several months, so Luo Fengxue rarely saw her. She actually didn't know the impact of her disappearance was so widespread. Since it could make one of the top cultivation groups in the celestial pole close their doors, it was clear how serious this matter was. At that moment, the old nascent soul Daoist standing in the middle raised his hand, and the core formation cultivator from before stepped back. Tiange once heard from Luo Fengxue that this nascent soul grandmaster was the head grand supreme elder of Xianxia school, which meant he was the #1 figure in Xianxia school. Reportedly, his cultivation level was in the late stage of the nascent soul realm, and his strength was also one of the best in the celestial pole. The head grand supreme elder, whose eyes had been half closed, suddenly opened them. His sharp gaze swept over the disciples in the square. After a while, he raised his voice and said, "Disciples, do you think Xianxia school is about to encounter a formidable enemy because of the mountain sealing order?" The square was silent, but judging from everyone's expressions, this nascent soul grandmaster was obviously right. Since the school was founded, the mountain sealing order only happened once every several hundred years, and every time it happened, it was a great disaster. The old Daoist once again closed his eyes and said in a leisurely tone, "Let me tell you, it's not only Xianxia school, but all of Kunwu is currently facing another demonic beast riot. Furthermore, according to the disciples' reports, this time's demonic beast riot is extraordinary. Xianxia school can be said to be strong now, but we must understand the principle that, the more prosperous it is, the easier it will fall. Being too strong will always attract disasters. For the sake of Xianxia school's disciples, the Grand Supreme Elder has decided to seal the mountain until the demonic beast riot is over. During this period, Xianxia school's disciples must obey orders and can't leave the mountain without permission." Once the head Grand Supreme Elder finished speaking, Tiange glanced at the foundation building cultivators around her and found many of them were frowning. Some were worried, some were excited, and some were afraid. She had heard about the demonic beast riot in the past. Most of the cultivation groups in the celestial pole were built on Kunwu mountain range, and to the south of Kunwu mountain range was a boundless forest. This forest and Kunwu mountain range combined to form the largest spiritual land in the celestial pole. There were many cultivators living on the mountain, and there were many demonic spirits growing in the forest. If the cultivation level of demonic spirits was high, their intelligence would gradually be similar to that of humans. Under normal circumstances, they wouldn't go out of the forest, but every once in a while, the big demonic beasts inside would order low-level demonic beasts to attack the mountains and obtain some medicinal pills, spirit tools, and the like from human cultivators to help them cultivate. Every time there was a conflict between humans and demonic beasts, it was both a calamity and an opportunity. Demonic beasts wanted to snatch medicinal pills, while humans also wanted to kill demonic beasts to obtain their beast cores or corpses. There was no justice or evil, they were just competing for what they wanted. Tiange pondered for a moment and immediately understood what her fellow foundation building disciples were thinking. They were excited because this was a good opportunity. If they made a great contribution or obtained some fated chances in this matter, their cultivation levels would advance very quickly. What they were afraid of was that some people would definitely leave the mountain to carry out a mission. Foundation-building disciples like them were the backbone of the mountain's strength. If there was an accident, they wouldn't even have their corpses left. Mo Tiange wasn't worried at all. In any case, she was Grandmaster Jinghe's registered disciple, so he definitely wouldn't send her to die for something too dangerous. Besides, she wasn't afraid. During the 7 years she wandered around with second uncle, she went everywhere and encountered danger countless times, so she didn't think there was anything to be afraid of. Alright, aura-refining disciples, go back to your Immortal's caves and cultivate with peace of mind. Foundation-building disciples, stay. Upon hearing that, the aura-refining disciples left one after another. They looked at the foundation-building disciples with sympathetic and envious expressions. Once all the aura-refining disciples had left, the core formation cultivator from before stepped forward. Martial nephews, many of you experienced the demonic beast riot 50 years ago, so I presume I don't need to explain it in detail. The demonic beast riot isn't something that can be resolved by sealing off the mountain. We still need to go and eliminate the enemies. Aura-refining disciples haven't entered the school of immortality yet, so you foundation-building disciples are the cornerstones of Xianxia school. You still need to work hard on this matter. We'll send 6 core formation cultivators and more than 100 foundation-building disciples. You can go and prepare yourselves, then wait for further notice. Once he finished speaking, the core formation cultivators signaled everyone to leave. Mo Tiange was full of questions. While following the crowd back to Clear Spring Peak, she was also puzzled. Shouldn't they announce the list of disciples participating in the demon-exterminating battle? Why did it end so easily? Tiange. Just as she landed on Clear Spring Peak, she heard a voice coming from behind her. She turned around and saw that it was Yi Jingwen. Big brother Yi. She looked at Yi Jingwen and saw that his expression was similar to Luo Fengshue's. He looked exhausted as if he had been busy all this time. That's not right. Yi Jingwen is the same as me. He doesn't have a job, so how could he be this tired? Yi Jingwen waved his hand, rolled up his sleeves, and walked towards the house. Let's talk inside. Mo Tiange promptly opened the door to her Immortal's cave and invited him inside. Once they entered, Yi Jingwen said, Tiange, in a few days I'll be leaving the mountain to carry out a mission. Mo Tiange was shocked. Yi Jingwen was already in the middle stage of the foundation-building realm at such a young age and was one of the best among the elite disciples. Logically speaking, he shouldn't be sent out before the situation was clear. Big brother Yi, why were you chosen? Yi Jingwen smiled bitterly and said, It can't be helped. My master was chosen, so I can only go with him. Could it be that the people who will go have already been decided? Yi Jingwen nodded. Before this matter was announced, the martial uncles already knew about it and already decided who would leave the mountain to exterminate the demons. Each of the 6 peaks will send a core formation senior, and our Clear Spring Peak will be sent by my master, Master Daoist Qingyuan. Oh! In that case, with the master there shouldn't be any danger. As for the foundation-building disciples, only a few of them are elite disciples, and most of them are ordinary disciples. You don't have to worry, they probably won't choose you. However, this matter also depends on the situation of the battle. If the situation isn't good, everyone might have to go, but if it's too good, they might send disciples like you who have just built your foundation to gain experience. I'm just here to tell you, so you have to be prepared. And I understand. Seeing that she agreed, Yi Jingwen stood up without even taking a sip of tea. Alright, I'll take my leave first. Big brother Yi, you have to be careful. Yi Jingwen looked back with a smile then hurriedly left. Mo Tiange turned around and went back to her Immortal's cave, her mind full of thoughts. She wasn't afraid of what Yi Jingwen said. When they left the mountain to exterminate demons, they would be led by core formation cultivators, so the danger wouldn't be too high. However, she had just advanced to the foundation-building realm and couldn't use the soul-refining art yet, so her methods were a bit lacking. If she really participated in the battle, she wasn't confident. Forget it, she'd better make some preparations. If it really was her turn, she wouldn't be flustered. She had to prepare some life-saving measures. Chapter 106. After feeding the little inferno beast an aura-nourishing pill, Emotienga looked up and saw several flight lights streaking across the sky. She pondered for a moment, then left the little inferno beast in the small valley and left the Immortal's cave by herself. After the mountain was sealed, the entire Great Mountain Barrier formation of Mount Taikong was activated, leaving only 1 or 2 entrances. Those disciples who were ordered to exterminate the demons would enter and leave from those entrances. However, other than the 100 or so disciples who were ordered to leave the mountain at the beginning, there were very few people coming in and out. This light must be a message. She hadn't received any news for so many days, so when she thought of Yi Jingwen, she pondered for a while, then went to the steward's hall. Before she entered the steward's hall, the 2 aura-refining disciples guarding the door greeted her. Martial Uncle Emotienga chuckled. Now that she was in the foundation-building realm, she was also a martial uncle in other people's eyes. She glanced at the steward's hall and asked, "Is there any news about the demonic beast riot?" One of the aura-refining disciples answered, "Martial Uncle, are you here to inquire about the news?" Emotienga nodded. "Correct. I have an old friend among the disciples of Mount Li. May I know how he's doing now?" The 2 aura-refining disciples glanced at each other. One of them said, "Martial Uncle, we also don't know much. We only know that the situation isn't good. Martial Uncle, you mustn't tell anyone about this. Aura-refining disciples still don't know about it. The situation is not good. Are there any casualties?" "It seems so. You don't have to worry, Martial Uncle. You'll get the news from Martial Uncle Luo soon." Presumably, these 2 disciples didn't dare to reveal too much, so Emotienga no longer asked. "Art, thank you." Not long after Emotienga returned from the steward's hall, Master Daoist Xianxia sent her a message telling all disciples to go to his Immortal's cave. Emotienga hurried over and saw that almost all of Martial Uncle Xuanin's disciples had arrived. Everyone was standing solemnly with anxious expressions on their faces. Emotienga quietly walked up to Luo Fengxue. Luo Fengxue shook her head at her and sighed softly. Emotienga's heart sank when she saw Emotienga's tired expression and worried gaze. Once all the disciples had arrived, Master Daoist Xianxia finally opened his eyes. With a solemn expression, he said, "You probably know the situation with the demonic beast riot this time isn't good. I asked you to come here to tell you about this." "Snow." Luo Fengxue raised her head and stepped forward. "Yes, Master." "You talk to them." Luo Fengxue responded. She then turned around with a solemn expression and said, "Senior martial brothers and sisters, today, the steward's hall received a message from a Mount Li disciple saying Martial Uncle Hanyu of Drifting Cloud Peak has fallen." As soon as she finished speaking, everyone's expression changed. They all knew what the death of a core formation cultivator meant. The battle this time would definitely be very intense. Next, they would definitely need to rescue him. Could it be that this time, their master, Luo Fengxue continued on, the head elder has already decided to send another group of disciples as reinforcements. The number of disciples will be similar to last time. Each peak will send 1 core formation cultivator, several elite disciples, and about 10 ordinary disciples. Our Clear Spring Peak has already decided that Martial Uncle Shou Jing will be going. Martial Uncle Shou Jing doesn't have any disciples, so the elite disciples will be chosen from among us. Emotienga was stunned. In Xianxia School, the cultivators who went to battle last time weren't too outstanding, but their cultivation levels weren't weak either. Clearly, the battle wasn't urgent. However, Martial Uncle Shou Jing was Grandmaster Jinghe's favorite disciple. His cultivation level and divine abilities were among the best among Xianxia School's core formation cultivators. Now, the battle had just started, but they already had to send him out. Apparently, the situation was very bad. What she could think of, the other disciples naturally already thought of. Those who were familiar with each other were currently discussing in low voices. Some were anxious, some were worried. "Enough," Master Daoist Xianxia said, stopping the disciples from whispering to each other. "Who among you wants to go?" None of the dozen or so disciples present answered him. After a while, someone finally stepped forward and asked, Master, isn't the current situation very critical? Master Daoist Xianxia nodded slightly. There's no need to hide this matter from you. We received news from the outside that the casualties of the first batch of disciples we sent have reached 30%. If you go now, it'll naturally be very dangerous. After he finished speaking, his gaze swept through the disciples and he said, Among you, those in the early stage of the foundation building realm don't need to go. Tiange quickly swept her gaze around and discovered that everyone was dumbfounded. Her master actually said that those in the early stage of the foundation building realm didn't need to go. Clearly, it was extremely dangerous. Although elite disciples like them were superior to ordinary disciples in fights of magical powers, they also cherished their lives more than ordinary disciples. Asking them to volunteer was too difficult. After a long time, no one stepped forward. Master Daoist Xianxia wrinkled his brows and said with displeasure, Is there no one willing? Master, a crisp female voice rang out, I'll go. Tiange looked up and was stunned. It was actually her second martial sister, Wei Jiasi. Frankly speaking, Tiange didn't have a very good impression of this senior martial sister Wei. Probably because her aptitude was excellent, her behavior was arrogant and she rarely looked people in the eye. Tiange's keen senses told her that this senior martial sister Wei looked down on her. However, she really didn't expect that this senior martial sister Wei would be so unyielding. She was obviously willing to go to a very dangerous place. Master Daoist Xianxia finally smiled as he looked at Wei Jiasi. Jiasi, you're very good. Who else wants to go? Tiange swept her gaze over the crowd. Wei Jiasi's expression was still calm, but there seemed to be a hint of determination in her eyes. Could it be that she had a reason to go? I'm also willing. Me too. After a while, two more disciples stepped forward. Master Daoist Xianxia showed a gratified smile and said, Good, very good. I'm very happy that you're willing to fight for the school. Everyone else can leave, but the three of you stay. Yes, Master. Tiange, let's go. After saluting Master Daoist Xianxia, Luo Fengxue quietly grabbed Tiange's hand and pulled her out of the cave. After leaving Master Daoist Xianxia's cave, the two of them walked for a while before Tiange asked, Senior Martial Sister Luo, is the situation really that dangerous? Luo Fengxue rubbed her red eyes and nodded. If it wasn't dangerous, Grandmaster wouldn't have let Martial Uncle Shoujing go. I hope Martial Uncle Shoujing and Martial Uncle Qingyun can come back safely. What are you thinking about? Tiange thought for a while then answered, I'm thinking about Senior Martial Sister Wei. Luo Fengxue let out aha and patted Tiange's shoulder. Do you think it's amazing that second martial sister is willing to take the risk? Not really, but it's indeed very rare. Most cultivators were selfish. Even if it was a famous cultivation group that cultivated one's mind, there weren't many people who were willing to go even though they knew it was dangerous. Luo Fengxue chuckled, patted Tiange's shoulder and said earnestly, Don't be too easily moved. Second martial sister took the initiative to go because, halfway through her sentence, Luo Fengxue stopped talking and looked around to make sure there was no one around before she continued in a low voice, because of Martial Uncle Shoujing. Tiange was confused. Luo Fengxue couldn't help but pat Tiange's head. Stupid. Just you wait, there must be other female disciples in our Clear Spring Peak who are willing to go. Huh. Tiange thought for a while and seemed to understand a little. You mean, Luo Fengxue rolled her eyes and muttered, In my opinion, it's their brains that aren't clear. What kind of person is Martial Uncle Shoujing? If their cultivation levels can't catch up, what's the use of thinking about it? The lifespan of us cultivators is far longer than that of mortals. If we don't have the same lifespan, how many years can we stay together? In the end, Luo Fengxue sighed. Who said the distance between cultivators and mortals was far? It was the same between cultivators. The lifespan of foundation building cultivators and core formation cultivators was at least 300 years apart. Even if they loved each other like honey, they still couldn't love each other to the end. Tiange said strangely, There are so many core formation cultivators, But why do they only like martial Uncle Shoujing? We're not mortal women. Do you think they only look at appearances? Luo Fengxue patted Mo Tiange's head again, but this time, she was praising her. That's right. That's why I said they're not clear. They're walking on the path of cultivation, but they're actually the same as mortal women. However, it's not strange for martial Uncle Shoujing to be liked. His aptitude is good, his cultivation level is high, he's handsome, and he's very young. None of the foundation building senior martial brothers in our school can compare to him. Really? Mo Tiange was curious. I haven't seen martial Uncle Shoujing yet. What does he look like? Luo Fengxue wanted to say something but didn't dare to. She said helplessly, he looks quite similar to senior martial brother Qin. Oh, think about it. This year, martial Uncle Shoujing he's only 140 years old. At this age, he's already in the middle stage of the core formation realm. If he's lucky, it's not impossible for him to advance to the nascent soul realm before he's 200 years old. Moreover, martial Uncle Shoujing has a good temper. Although he doesn't like to talk and is a cultivation maniac, it's precisely because of this that he's likable. Sometimes, women are the same as men. The colder and more arrogant a man is, the more they want to conquer him, isn't that right? Mo Tiange stared at the sky and thought for a moment before she shook her head. I don't think so. In other words, this martial Uncle Shoujing was quite similar to senior martial brother Qin. However, to be honest, if it wasn't because they'd been together for several months, which made her develop a sense of dependence, she wouldn't have thought senior martial brother Qin was very likable. Most cultivators weren't ugly, and there were also a lot of them who were handsome. Moreover, most of them were cultivation maniacs, so there didn't seem to be anything special about them. Luo Fengxue looked defeated by Mo Tiange. I admit defeat. I don't have that kind of tenacity. Forget it. Mo Tiange smiled then asked, Senior Martial Sister Luo, are you saying Senior Martial Sister Wei likes martial Uncle Shoujing? Hee, others don't know, but I do. Luo Fengxue said quite disdainfully, martial Uncle Shoujing occasionally comes out to give sermons, and second martial sister always goes. Moreover, you also know that martial Uncle Shoujing doesn't have any disciples, so inner disciples like us often get errands and go to martial Uncle Shoujing's Immortal's cave to handle some chores. Senior martial sister Wei goes there every time. Luo Fengxue looked around but didn't see anyone, so she lowered her voice and continued to say, about this matter, I have to tell you about someone first. We used to have a martial Uncle Qingyuan, Grandmaster's second disciple, but he died in an accident. His descendant, one of our senior martial sisters, was taken to Clear Spring Peak by Grandmaster. This happened more than 100 years ago. At that time, martial Uncle Shoujing had just been taken to Mount Taikong by Grandmaster. The two of them were about the same age, so Grandmaster taught them together. As for this senior martial sister of ours, her aptitude is a bit lacking, but fortunately, with Grandmaster personally teaching her, how bad could she be? Just like martial Uncle Shoujing, she also built her foundation at the age of 20. But this senior martial sister, probably because she grew up with martial Uncle Shoujing and because Grandmaster personally taught her, she became complacent and always regarded martial Uncle Shoujing as something. Luo Fengxue continued to say, later, when martial Uncle Shoujing's cultivation level surpassed this senior martial sister's, Grandmaster gave him his own Immortal's cave. After that, he rarely contacted this senior martial sister. You also know that martial Uncle Shoujing is a cultivation maniac. Aside from cultivating, he doesn't like anything else, so this senior martial sister's wish naturally fell through. However, she has a bad temper and always makes things difficult for the female disciples who work in martial Uncle's Immortal's cave. So senior martial sister Wei was put in a difficult position? Exactly. Luo Fengxue curled her lips. At that time, second martial sister was only in the early stage of the foundation building realm while this senior martial sister was in the middle stage. I don't know why she went crazy, but she actually beat second martial sister until she suffered internal injuries and vomited blood. Because of this, Grandmaster let that senior martial sister go outside. Right now, we don't even know which courtyard she's in. Mo Tiange was rendered speechless by this show of jealousy and jealousy. Immortal clans, prestigious cultivation groups. Unexpectedly, they also had this kind of gossip. Don't tell others about this. I'll tell you the details when I have time. I'm exhausted, I'm going to rest first. Chapter 107. Before long, the second batch of demon-exterminating disciples set off. Senior Martial Sister Wei was among them. They set off quietly. When Mo Tiange found out, she only received a sound-transmitting talisman at the entrance of her cave. It was sent by Qin Shi, saying he was also on the list of the second batch of disciples, but time was tight, so he couldn't say goodbye to her. Mo Tiange only stared blankly for a moment before continuing to cultivate and concoct medicinal pills as usual. She couldn't meddle in these things, but she had to be prepared in case she was sent out of the sect during the fierce battle. A large cultivation group like Xianxia School had about 500 foundation-building cultivators, but they sent out more than 200 in these 2 consecutive battles, which accounted for half of the total number of disciples. According to the news they received last time, the casualties of the first batch of disciples were about 30 to 40 people. For a medium-sized cultivation group, the loss of 30 to 40 foundation-building cultivators was an immeasurable loss. Even a large cultivation group like Xianxia School couldn't underestimate it. Moreover, the battle had just started and was fierce. After this demonic beast riot, Xianxia School would probably lose at least 100 foundation-building cultivators, which was enough to wipe out a medium-sized cultivation group. In that case, only a few foundation-building cultivators in the school would be able to escape this disaster. Therefore, she had to be prepared in case she was sent out to participate in the battle without any means to protect herself. Time passed day by day. A tense atmosphere gradually filled the entire Xianxia School. Mo Tiange learned from Luo Fengxue that the whole of Kunwu was involved in the demonic beast riot. If Xianxia School hadn't issued a mountain sealing order and activated the Great Mountain Protecting Formation at the beginning, all the aura refining disciples would have been killed. Although there were many casualties among the foundation-building disciples, the aura refining disciples weren't affected. Therefore, even if Xianxia School suffered heavy losses, it could recover in 100 or 200 years, and the school's strength wouldn't decline. After learning about this, Mo Tiange couldn't help but sigh. The head Grand Supreme Elder, Lord Daoist Jinyang, was able to predict the direction of the situation at the beginning and avoid losses. Otherwise, Xianxia School wouldn't have been able to escape this disaster. Luo Fengxue wasn't busy these days. Reportedly, because this matter was of great importance, the core formation elders of the school head's generation had taken over all these matters. Right now, the foundation-building deacons only needed to pay attention to it from time to time. When she was free, Luo Fengxue came to chat with her every day. Although Mo Tiange was anxious to cultivate the soul-refining art, she also knew this matter couldn't be rushed. Every day, she just cultivated step by step and chatted with Luo Fengxue. Luo Fengxue was actually busy for nothing. Her aptitude was good, but she wasn't too keen on cultivating. Instead, she liked to deal with miscellaneous matters. There was almost nothing in the entire Clear Spring Peak that she didn't know. She even knew a lot of gossip about the other peaks. Mo Tiange had never come into contact with people like her. However, such a lively scene reminded her of Murong Yan. Mo Tiange wondered whether Murong Yan had built her foundation or not. Hey Tiange, why are you in a daze again? Mo Tiange regained her train of thought and shook her head. It's nothing. I was just thinking, Senior Martial Sister Luo, you've been really free lately. I kind of missed the times when you were busy. Artist Luo. She said, out and said, Mo, she, Mo, Luo and, she, he and. Luo Fengxue glared at her and said, if eldest Martial Sister wasn't here, I wouldn't bother you. Right now, only the two of us live here. If I didn't talk to you, would I talk to the spiritual beast? Luo Fengxue glanced at her and remembered something. By the way, how old are you, Tiange? Mo Tiange thought about it and sighed. 24. In the blink of an eye, it's been almost 4 years since I came to Xianxia school. These past 4 years had been too smooth for her, so she felt time passed quickly. Oh, if I remember correctly, you're 1 year younger than me. Are you practicing a youthful cultivation technique? You look the same as when you first came. I think so. Luo Fengxue shouted, you really don't know how lucky you are. A youthful cultivation technique. We female cultivators mostly cultivate to stay young. With a suitable youthful cultivation technique, we can save a lot of look-preserving pills. Many people are envious of us, but you're actually saying I think so. Mo Tiange felt a bit guilty. She got her cultivation technique too easily, so she didn't cherish it. Luo Fengxue shook her head and sighed. You're smart but you're slow. You're stupid but you're very good at controlling your limits. I can't even tell what kind of person you are. Mo Tiange was very curious. Senior martial sister Luo, how many kinds of people do you classify? Then, Luo Fengxue thought for a while then said, it's actually quite simple. Look at the 2 senior martial sisters living here and me. We each have one kind of person. Eldest martial sister is the most likable kind. She's considerate like a woman and has the spirit of loyalty like a man. Second martial sister is the kind that's neither likable nor hateful. She's too lazy to pay attention to other people and doesn't look for trouble. As for me, I'm the kind that most people like, but a few don't. You see, I'm very popular. Among the disciples of Clear Spring Peak, I dare say I know the most people. Luo Fengxue praised herself for a while then said, there's also the kind that most people dislike. They're the kind that doesn't have a good character but isn't narrow-minded. The last kind is the kind that's completely hated by others. The representative is our senior martial sister who was sent out of Mount Taikong. She doesn't have any self-awareness and only has herself in her heart. She thinks everyone has to revolve around her. Almost everyone hates this kind of person. Upon hearing Luo Fengxue talking about this gossip, Mo Tiange asked, could it be that this senior martial sister has no likability at all? Now that you've asked, I really can't remember. It happened a long time ago. At that time, I think I was only 11 or 12 years old. I remember it happened not long after Martial Uncle Shoujing returned from Demonic Mountain. At that time, Martial Uncle Shoujing's cultivation level dropped greatly and he barely survived. Second martial sister accepted the task of taking care of Martial Uncle Shoujing's cave while he was in closed-door meditation. Who would have thought that that senior martial sister actually hated second martial sister for being able to take care of Martial Uncle Shoujing? She made a big fuss and even attacked second martial sister. Think about it, Martial Uncle Shoujing almost lost his life, but she still cared about being jealous. Naturally, she greatly offended Martial Uncle and Grandmaster. It was because of her father that Grandmaster didn't punish her. He only told her to leave Xianxia school and go to the branch courtyard to reflect on her mistakes for several decades. Alas, in any case, I've never heard of anyone liking her. Oh, this kind of person was indeed unlikable. She didn't even have a sense of propriety. Speaking of eldest martial sister, I wonder how she's doing. I'm not really worried about second martial sister. In any case, Martial Uncle Shoujing is with her. Luo Fengxue looked up at the sky and sighed. There's still no news from senior martial sister Han? There's a bit of news. Luo Fengxue thought for a moment then said, a few days ago, there was news that a secret mark left by senior martial sister was found, but they haven't found her yet. I think it's very likely that senior martial sister is still alive. That's good. No bad news is good news. Luo Fengxue pondered for a moment, then clapped her hands and said, you're right. That's exactly what you said. The two of them chatted for a while when they suddenly received a summoning talisman at the same time. Oh, it's Master's. Mo Tiange nodded. Mine too. It seems to be the same thing. Let's go. The two of them finished their chores and rushed to Master Daoist Xuanin's cave together. Martial Uncle. This time, Master Daoist Xianin wasn't meditating. Instead, he was walking in circles in the hall with his hands behind his back. When he saw them coming in, he stopped and said, Good, you're all here. Come here. He turned around and sat down on the main seat. He looked at his disciples with a solemn expression and said in a heavy voice, I called you here because the battle is fierce. Maybe you'll be sent to join the battle in the next moment. Mo Tiange was shocked. She glanced at Luo Fengxue, and both of them looked bewildered. Xianxia School had sent more than 12 core formation cultivators. Even if Martial Uncle Hanyu died, there were still 11 core formation cultivators left. Xianxia School only had a little more than 40 core formation cultivators in total. They'd already sent a quarter of them, but they still couldn't hold on? Could it be that one of the martial uncles also died? Master, eldest martial sister, second martial sister, the Master Daoist Xianin shook his head. Qingyu has been found, so he's fine. However, with the current situation, it's hard to say whether they can come back or not. I've decided to leave the mountain to provide reinforcements. Among you, those in the middle stage of the foundation building realm and above, follow me into battle. All the disciples were startled, but no one dared to object. Those in the middle stage of the foundation building realm and above all answered in a low voice, Yes, Master. As for you too. Master Daoist Xianin looked at Mo Tiange and Luo Fengxue. You two in the early stage of the foundation building realm also mustn't relax. I reckon that before long, you'll also have to leave the mountain to participate in the demon exterminating battle. Therefore, I'll give you some magic tools and talismans first. Take them with you. Yes, Master. Mo Tiange and Luo Fengxue glanced at each other, then each took the magic tools and talismans from Master Daoist Xianin. After listening to his admonishment for a while, they finally left Master Daoist Xianin's cave. The two of them walked in silence for a while. Finally, Mo Tiange said hesitantly, Senior Martial Sister Luo, do you have any way to inquire about the specific situation? Luo Fengxue asked absent-mindedly, what kind of information do you want to inquire about? One of them is Big Brother Yi, whom you also know. The other one is Senior Martial Brother Qin. Last time, Senior Martial Brother Qin said he also wanted to go to battle, but I haven't heard any news from him. Luo Fengxue said, Your Senior Martial Brother Qin will definitely be fine, but it's hard to say for Senior Martial Brother Yi. Rest assured, I'll go to the Steward's Hall and ask the other Senior Martial brothers and sisters. How can you be so sure? Of course. Luo Fengxue's eyes shifted. Senior Martial Brother Qin's identity is special. He definitely won't be allowed to participate in dangerous matters. Besides, there's also Martial Uncle Shoujing. That's true. That being said, Mo Tiange still felt uneasy. In any case, Yi Jingwen advanced into the foundation building realm many years ago and was now in the middle stage of the foundation building realm. Qin Shi, on the other hand, advanced only a few years ago. Most likely his realm hadn't even stabilized yet, let alone his divine abilities. Even if he had a lot of treasures on him, without a cultivation level, it would all be in vain. However, she didn't have to worry for long because not long after Martial Uncle Xianin left the mountain, she received a notice to leave the mountain with Luo Fengxue to provide support. Chapter 108. Mo Tiange frowned as she stared at the billowing smoke and dust below. She had never thought that there would be such a chaotic scene outside. The fleeing crowd was chased by low-level demonic beasts. Those who couldn't escape in time were caught up by the demonic beasts. They were either torn to a bloody pulp or swallowed whole. All of a sudden, she clenched her fists and bit her lips. In the end, she still retained some of her rationality and looked at Master Daoist Sushin. Martial Uncle Sushin? Daoist Master Sushin was a woman with a cold expression. At this moment, she raised her hand and shot a horsetail whisk at the demon beast below. Upon seeing this, Mo Tiange and the others attacked one after another. Blood splattered everywhere, and limbs flew everywhere. These were all low-level demonic beasts, and with a few dozen of them taking action, they were immediately cleaned up. Mo Tiange wiped the blood off her hand, then glanced at Luo Fengxue. Luo Fengxue's complexion was a bit pale. She whispered, How could this be? Mo Tiange saw that Luo Yunyang was trembling. She knew Luo Yunyang had been a disciple of a famous cultivation group since she was a child and had never experienced such a bloody scene. Mo Tiange held Luo Yunyang's hand and said, "Senior Martial Sister Luo, let's just kill the demonic beast." Luo Fengxue finally regained her composure after a long time. She shook her head and said, "Don't worry, I can adapt." He then smiled bitterly. In fact, our Xianxia school has always been prepared for danger in times of peace. Most of our disciples have experienced fighting. It's just that I like doing chores, so I never thought there'd be a day when I'd need to fight by myself. Alas, I've indulged myself too much. Most of these people were mortals who lived in a certain city or a certain clan. Now that they were saved, they all knelt down and kowtowed. There were even some who begged bitterly to be brought to a safe place. Feeling a bit sad, Mo Tiange turned to look at Master Daoist Suxin. Master Daoist Suxin shook her head and said, "We have other important matters to attend to. We can't delay any longer." Mo Tiange knew what Master Daoist Suxin said wasn't false. Their group only had about 20 people in total. If they sent these mortals away and came back later, they wouldn't know how long they'd have to drag things out. The longer they arrived one day later, the more difficult the situation would be. Since it was beyond his power, there was no need to force it. However, someone shouted, "Uncle Master, if we don't do anything, these mortals will probably die." Master Daoist Master Suxin glanced at that person coldly. "Although our Dao school scrupulously abides by the rules, we still need to weigh the consequences. If these mortals leave Kunwu Mountain as soon as possible, they'll be able to keep their lives. Let's go." As he spoke, he controlled his flying magic treasure and instantly left this place. The immortal path was not heartless, but there was a limit to it. Mo Tiange sighed inwardly but didn't say anything. Several days later, they finally arrived at their destination. Mount Taikong had a great mountain-protecting formation. The demonic beasts once suffered losses from this heaven and earth life-killing formation, so they didn't dare to attack directly. Instead, they kept harassing the small cultivation groups and clans attached to Xianxia School in the vicinity of Mount Taikong. It was precisely because of this that Xianxia School couldn't stay out of this matter. Many of the disciples and resources of big cultivation groups came from these cultivation clans and small cultivation groups. Without them, half of Xianxia School's foundation would be ruined. Before she left the mountain, Mo Tiange already knew that the war in West Kunwu was mainly happening at Luoyan Cliff. Most of those cultivation clans and small cultivation groups had also moved there. From afar, everyone could see that there was a large array set up on the cliff. Within the array, there were tents all over the mountain. Master Daoist Suxin looked at this scene with a deep frown on her face. She led them to stop outside the array. A group of patrolling cultivators came over and respectfully saluted them. "May I ask Senior Xianxia School's Daoist name?" Master Daoist Suxin's disciple stepped forward and answered, "My master's Daoist name is Suxin. We came to help under the orders of the sect." "Oh, so it's Master Daoist Suxin. Sorry for not coming out to greet you. I'm Hong Yuan from the Xianxia sect, currently responsible for patrolling Luoyan Cliff. Please show me your sect identity tablet. Please forgive me if I offended you in any way." Hong Yuan was polite, but he didn't forget his duty. Although they were all wearing Xianxia School's uniform, he still remembered to check their identity tablets. Master Daoist Suxin nodded slightly and took out a jade tablet. Hong Yuan personally confirmed it and said respectfully, "Senior, please wait here for a moment. I'll inform Senior Lingxi to open the formation." After obtaining Master Daoist Suxin's permission, Hong Yuan sent a sound-transmitting talisman. Before long, a core formation cultivator wearing Xianxia School's uniform came over with several disciples. He said happily, "Senior Martial Sister Suxin, you're also here." Master Daoist Suxin still looked cold, but her gaze softened a bit. "Junior Martial Brother Lingxi, how's the situation?" Mo Tiange hadn't seen this Master Daoist Lingxi before, but he still looked young, so he must be a talented person. Master Daoist Lingxi said, "Senior Martial Sister, please come in first. We'll talk about the details later." He then led everyone into the formation. The disciples behind him arranged for the foundation-building cultivators while he welcomed Master Daoist Su Xin into the big tent. Mo Tiange and Luo Fengxue listened to their respective arrangements, but Master Daoist Su Xin was stunned when she entered the tent. There were more than 20 cultivators sitting inside the tent, all of whom were in the core formation realm. Most of them belonged to Xianxia School, but there were also some cultivators from small cultivation groups attached to Xianxia School. This was probably the majority of Xianxia School's cultivators participating in the battle. Why did they gather here? Junior Martial Sister Su Xin, you're also here. Master Daoist Xianyin sighed when he saw her. Including Su Xin, Clear Spring Peak had a total of 7 core formation cultivators. 4 of them were already here, and the number of cultivators from the other peaks was also about the same. Thus, half of Xianxia School's core formation cultivators were already involved in this demonic beast riot. After greeting everyone, Master Daoist Su Xin went to sit next to Master Daoist Xianyin. Senior Martial Brother Xianyin, how's the situation now? Master Daoist Xianyin shook his head. Several core formation cultivators died several days ago. What? Master Daoist Su Xin frowned and glanced around. 7 or 8 core formation cultivators from Xianxia School weren't here. What about Junior Martial Brother Qingyuan and Junior Martial Brother Shoujing? Master Daoist Xianyin said, Junior Martial Brother Qingyuan went out to carry out a mission. Junior Martial Brother Shoujing, he paused. Master Daoist Su Xin anxiously asked, what's wrong? Junior Martial Brother Shoujing is missing. Master Daoist Xianyin furrowed his brows. During the battle a few days ago, Junior Martial Brother Shoujing fought against a 7th-rank Radiant Beast. Since then, we haven't been able to contact him. There are also other core formation cultivators, but some of them are missing. We're currently discussing this matter. Missing? Master Daoist Su Xin shook her head and said calmly, although a 7th-rank Radiant Beast is equivalent to a late-stage core formation cultivator, Junior Martial Brother Shoujing has always been quick-witted and has magic weapons to escape, so his life shouldn't be in danger. I'm afraid he's injured and is hiding somewhere to recuperate. That's what I think too. Master Daoist Xianyin nodded, but the worry on his face didn't diminish. It's just that the current battle situation is really bad. Junior Martial Brother Shoujing is still outside, so I'm still worried. Master Daoist Su Xin nodded. After a while, she asked, Senior Martial Brother Xianyin, how strong are the opponents? We have so many core formation cultivators, but we actually can't gain the upper hand? Master Daoist Xianyin smiled bitterly. The opponents have 5 or 6 7th-rank demonic beasts, plus more than a dozen 6th and 5th-rank demonic beasts. They outnumber us, and their cultivation levels are also slightly higher. This is really, they actually have so many 7th-rank demonic beasts? Master Daoist Su Xin was shocked. 7th-rank demonic beasts were equivalent to late-stage core formation cultivators, but there weren't many late-stage core formation cultivators among them. Exactly, it's very troublesome. Master Daoist Xianyin shook his head. What? Mo Tiange, who was staying in the temporary tent, was shocked when she heard the news Luo Fengxue inquired about. Luo Fengxue continued to say, I heard Martial Uncle Shoujing was fighting a 7th-rank demonic beast, but he lost contact with him later. It's been 7 or 8 days now. Mo Tiange stopped what she was doing and sat down. What about Senior Martial Brother Qin? He's also missing. Luo Fengxue glanced at her. Don't worry. Didn't you say no news is good news? Mo Tiange sat in a daze for a while then asked, have they looked for him? I only heard that Martial Uncle Qingyuan might have gone to look for Martial Uncle Shoujing. There's still no news, so I'm not sure. Mo Tiange no longer said anything. She held her breath in her heart. She really couldn't let it go, but her reason told her that she couldn't help in this matter and being anxious would be useless. She stood up, thought about it, then sat down again. After repeating this several times, Luo Fengxue finally couldn't stand it anymore. Calm down. With Martial Uncle Shoujing's cultivation level, he'll be fine. I'm not talking about Martial Uncle Shoujing. Mo Tiange closed her eyes and took a deep breath, but she realized it was futile. Her chest was still thumping. She wanted to rush out, but she didn't know what to do. Luo Fengxue looked pensive. After staring at her for a long time, she suddenly said, "Do you like senior martial brother Qin?" Mo Tiange was stunned. She shook her head. "No, if you don't, why are you in such a hurry?" I'm just worried. You don't like him, so what are you worried about?" Luo Fengxue frowned and said sternly, "Tiange, I advise you that if you really have such thoughts, you should control your heart." I know." Mo Tiange sat down dejectedly. She covered her face and said, "I admit I used to, but I know what you want to say. I can also swear that I don't have any delusions right now, I just regard him as a friend. If the one who went missing today was Big Brother Yi or you, I'd also be worried." Luo Fengxue was silent for a long time before she sighed softly. "All right, I won't say much, although I think you definitely don't know." "Know what?" Right after she finished speaking, a voice came from outside. Soon afterward, a woman lifted the curtain and walked in. "Eldest martial sister." Upon hearing Luo Fengshue's greeting, Mo Tiange looked up and saw Han Qingyu looking at them with a smile. She hastily stood up and said, "Senior martial sister Han." Han Qingyu looked like an amiable and gentle woman. Although she wasn't very beautiful, she was very likable and always had a smile on her face. Luo Fengxue immediately rushed over and shouted in surprise, "Eldest martial sister, are you all right?" "I'm fine." Han Qingyu affectionately patted Luo Fengshue's head. She was much older than Luo Fengxue. According to seniority in the secular world, she was old enough to be Luo Fengshue's great-grandmother. She watched Luo Fengxue grow up and treated her like a junior. After comforting Luo Fengxue, Han Qingyu turned around and said to Mo Tiange with a smile, "Tiange, I haven't congratulated you on building your foundation. You must be tired from the journey, right?" Mo Tiange smiled and said, "Thank you, senior martial sister Han. It's great that you're all right. We were all very worried." Han Qingyu gracefully smiled and sat down. She then softly reprimanded Luo Fengxue, "Fengxue, in the future, you can't say this kind of thing carelessly. There are a lot of people here. Who knows who might hear you?" Luo Fengxue nodded obediently. "I understand, eldest martial sister." Han Qingyu smiled and nodded. She then turned around and said to Mo Tiange, "I came to see you and tell you about the current situation. Perhaps you'll soon have to face demonic beasts, so you can be mentally prepared." Chapter 109. Mo Tiange. Upon hearing her name, Mo Tiange stepped forward. There were 7 or 8 cultivators standing next to her. They were the ones whose names were called and who had to accept the same mission. Master Daoist Xianxia solemnly swept his gaze over them and said, "Wei Jiasi will be the leader of your group. Your mission is to rescue injured fellow Daoists. Do you hear me?" Master Daoist Xianxia waved his hand and said, "Go." Mo Tiange silently followed Wei Jiasi and left the area. Their group of foundation-building cultivators was either injured or had weak cultivation levels. Obviously, Master Daoist Xianxia deliberately gave them an easy mission. After flying away from Luoyan Cliff, the battle hadn't started yet. The 8 of them stood on the hillside for a while before they saw demonic beasts approaching one after another. Cultivators from Luoyan Cliff also came out to meet them. After a while, Mo Tiange heard Luo Fengxue whisper, "Look over there." Mo Tiange looked up and saw a long-tailed demonic beast in the sky. Judging from its momentum, it was probably in the 5th rank or higher. It was fighting against more than a dozen foundation-building cultivators, but it didn't seem to be at a disadvantage. This long-tailed demonic beast's tail was several feet long. Every time it swung its tail, if someone didn't dodge in time, they would fall from their flying magic tool. Upon seeing this, Wei Jiasi ordered, "Go and rescue them." The 8 of them each flew towards the heavily injured people and carried them to the back of Luoyan Cliff. Once the battle started, this was the place where the injured were treated. As soon as they carried the injured people over, someone came to greet them. Wei Jiasi called out, "Senior Martial Brother Kuang." The person who came was also wearing Xianxia School's disciple robes. He was in the peak stage of the foundation building realm. His attitude was very cold, but his every move was graceful. The person just nodded at Wei Jiasi, then turned around and called out, "Little Bai." An early-stage foundation building youngster ran over from behind. Senior martial brother Kuang Zhu. Someone had already taken over the injured people. This senior martial brother Kuang said as he walked inside, "Is the medicine ready? Let's start." The youngster just nodded at them, then went inside. Even though she was treated so coldly, the always arrogant Wei Jiasi didn't show any displeasure. She just glanced at them and said, "Continue." Mo Tiange followed her and flew away, continuing to cooperate with Luo Fengxue and search for the injured people to bring them to the back. Once they were far away from Wei Jiasi, Luo Fengxue whispered, "Are you very curious?" Mo Tiange glanced at the battlefield not far away and nodded. Luo Fengxue smiled mysteriously. Senior martial brother Kuang Zhu is the #1 foundation building disciple. Aside from martial uncle Shoujing, he's the most popular male disciple in the group. Is that so? Senior martial brother Kuang was indeed handsome and elegant. Isn't that so? Luo Fengxue sighed when she noticed Mo Tiange was still in a daze. Forget it, I won't tease you anymore. It's indeed a bit hard on you. Senior martial sister Luo. How could Mo Tiange not know that Luo Fengxue was doing this for her own good? However, how could she smile now? Luo Fengxue signaled Mo Tiange that she didn't need to say anything more. The two of them continued to search for the wounded in silence. Sometimes, when they saw the mangled corpses, Luo Fengxue's face would turn pale, making Mo Tiange very worried. Fortunately, Mo Tiange quickly adapted to the situation. As time went by, the fights of magical power became more and more intense. Occasionally, a 5th rank or higher demonic beast would appear, and core formation seniors would fight them. Fights of magical power between cultivators of this level were earth-shattering, so it was inevitable that low-level cultivators would be affected as well. Mo Tiange and Luo Fengxue had no choice but to split up to rescue people. While they were on their way, a strong wind suddenly swept over them. Mo Tiange, who was standing on her flying sword, lost her balance and almost fell off. She stepped on the flying sword in time and turned a corner, only to see a 3rd-rank demonic beast chasing after them. Cold sweat immediately trickled down her back. The demonic beast's eyes revealed an ominous glint. It clapped its palms together and a red beam of light shot towards them. Mo Tiange controlled her flying sword to dodge everywhere. She held a talisman in one hand and the shuttle of flying Apsara in the other and threw it out. The shuttle of flying Apsara turned into a golden light, then into a thin ray of light, flying towards the demonic beast in a dense formation. A 3rd-rank demonic beast was equivalent to a middle-stage foundation-building cultivator. Ever since Mo Tiange broke through, she hadn't fought with others. At this moment, she carefully controlled the shuttle of flying Apsara while throwing talismans in her other hand. These talismans were given to her by martial uncle Xianin before they left. When they arrived here, she and Luo Fengxue went to greet him and he gave them many more talismans to protect them. Wind and rain rustling, and wind blowing clouds chaotic. Several high-level wind element talismans were thrown at the demonic beast, forcing it to take a few steps back. Mo Tiange immediately withdrew the shuttle of flying Apsara and controlled her flying sword to flee at full speed. However, demonic beasts had thick skin, so the power of the attacks was often reduced when they landed on their bodies. She was only a breath late, so the demonic beast caught up with her again. Mo Tiange turned her head to look around. The fight was in full swing, so no one came to help her. Moreover, the demonic beast was extremely fast. Just as it was about to catch up, she raised her hand and released the shuttle of flying Apsara again. This demonic beast was already a 3rd-rank demonic beast, so its intelligence was different from that of wild animals. It knew the power of the shuttle of flying Apsara, so it immediately slapped its front paw, releasing a fire element spell from its palm. Mo Tiange controlled her flying sword to circle around the demonic beast. She released the shuttle of flying Apsara from time to time, restraining the demonic beast's movements. Whenever the demonic beast attacked, she would retreat a bit. While it was casting its spell, she would control the golden ray to stab it. After repeating this several times, the demonic beast was enraged and went berserk. Tienge was greatly alarmed when flames came crashing down from the sky. She didn't expect this demonic beast could actually use this kind of spell. She quickly moved forward to avoid it, but she felt a sharp pain in her back. She couldn't avoid it and was burned. Tienge trembled and almost lost control of the shuttle of flying Apsara. Just as the demonic beast's huge paw was about to hit her again, a flying sword suddenly flew from the side and firmly pierced the demonic beast's head. The demonic beast cried out in pain. Tienge seized this opportunity and withdrew the shuttle of flying Apsara. All the golden rays pierced the demonic beast's head. She then pointed her finger and the golden rays broke through its body. The demonic beast roared and finally fell to the ground. Tienge turned her head and saw Wei Jiaxi's cold figure. "Thank you, Senior Martial Sister Wei." Tienge cupped her hands gratefully. Wei Jiaxi humphed softly but didn't answer. Instead, she turned around and left. Tienge couldn't help but smile bitterly. Although she saved her, this Senior Martial Sister Wei still hated her. However, as she watched Wei Jiaxi's back, Tienge gradually frowned. This direction, Tienge didn't have time to think carefully. Ignoring the pain in her back, she followed Wei Jiaxi. When she was fighting the demonic beast just now, she had already left the main battlefield. She originally thought Wei Jiaxi just happened to pass by, but now it seemed that this wasn't the case. Although she seemed to be chasing a demonic beast, Tienge knew Wei Jiaxi was in charge of treating the injured, so she didn't need to do this. After walking for a short distance, Tienge saw Luo Fengshue's figure. After thinking for a moment, she sent her a sound-transmitting talisman. Luo Fengshue received the sound-transmitting talisman. She looked up and found Tienge's location, then flew over. "What's the matter, Tienge?" Tienge pointed in the distance and said, "Look, it's Senior Martial Sister Wei." Luo Fengshue glanced at her but still didn't understand. "What's wrong with Senior Martial Sister Wei? Look at the direction she's going." Luo Fengshue turned her head and carefully observed for a while. Her expression suddenly changed. "Senior Martial Sister Wei is leaving." Tienge nodded. "Senior Martial Sister Wei is injured. She doesn't have to fight this time, so why chase the demonic beast? There's no one in that direction." Luo Fengshue pondered for a moment, then said, "Let's follow her and take a look." "This..." Tienge hesitated for a moment. "We still have to look for our injured companions. We're not the only team in charge of looking for the injured. Besides, the battle is about to end, so it'll be fine if we're not here." Tienge looked around and confirmed that the outcome of the battle had already been decided. She nodded and said, "All right." The two of them then restrained their breaths and followed Wei Jiaxi at a leisurely pace. After crossing several low peaks and entering a dense forest, Wei Jiaxi's flying sword suddenly sped up, blocking the path of a second-rank demonic beast that was running ahead of them. A small flag appeared in her hand. She waved the flag, and with a thunderous sound, the demonic beast in front of her fell down in an instant. Tienge and Luo Fengshue glanced at each other. Both of them were even more certain that Wei Jiaxi was clearly capable of killing this demonic beast, yet she kept chasing it through the forest. There was definitely a problem. Sure enough, after she killed the demonic beast, she didn't turn back. Instead, she continued to move forward. Her speed was so fast that the two of them almost couldn't keep up. The trees became denser and denser, and they went deeper and deeper into the forest. After an unknown amount of time, Wei Jiaxi finally stopped. She looked around, seemingly looking for something. "This won't do," Luo Fengshue said in a low voice. "This place is very far from Luoyan Cliff. It's too dangerous. We have to call second Martial Sister back first." Tienge quickly pulled her back. "But if you call her back now, we won't know what she wants to do." Luo Fengshue stared at Tienge with bright eyes and asked seriously, "Tienge, are you suspecting that second Martial Sister is?" "Of course not." Mo Tiange interrupted her with a conflicted expression. Senior Martial Sister Wei just saved me. I know that although her temper isn't good, she's not a bad person. However, her current behavior is really too strange. Luo Fengxue was silent for a moment before she said, no matter what second Martial Sister wants to do, I believe her. After she finished speaking, she chased after Wei Jiasi. Mo Tiange wanted to stop her, but her actions had already startled Wei Jiasi. She had no choice but to follow her. Second Martial Sister. When Wei Jiasi saw them, her expression turned cold. You, second Martial Sister. Luo Fengxue looked around. There seemed to be traces of fights of magical powers. What are you looking for? Wei Jiasi said coldly, it's none of your business. Luo Fengxue suddenly turned around and stared at Wei Jiasi. Second Martial Sister, are you looking for Martial Uncle Shoujing? When she said this, not only Wei Jiasi, but Mo Tiange was also shocked. Luo Fengxue said slowly, I heard that Martial Uncle Shoujing disappeared in this direction a few days ago. At that time, he told you foundation building disciples to go back first. There were also traces of fights of magical powers here, so I guessed you must be looking for Martial Uncle Shoujing. Wei Jiasi's expression changed. In the end, she clenched her teeth and said, what I want to do is none of your business. Fengxue, go back. I won't go back. Luo Fengxue stared at her resolutely. Second Martial Sister, wake up. Martial Uncle Shoujing is completely different from us. Some things can't be done just because you want to. Wei Jiasi humphed. I don't want to do anything. If you don't want to do anything, then come back with us. Martial Uncle Shoujing's whereabouts are naturally in Martial Uncle Qingyuan's hands. What's the use of you sneaking out? Even if Martial Uncle Qingyuan can't find him, can you? Perhaps because Luo Fengshue's accusing tone angered her, anger appeared on Wei Jiasi's face. I told you, it has nothing to do with you. Then Martial Uncle Shoujing also has nothing to do with you. Luo Fengxue showed no mercy. Second Martial Sister, you're such a proud person, so why can't you see past this? Think about it yourself. Your aptitude isn't worse than eldest Martial Sister's. Eldest Martial Sister entered the late stage of the foundation building realm 10 years ago, but you're still in the middle stage now. Do you think Master doesn't know? Master just wants you to realize it yourself. Luo Fengxue. Unable to restrain her anger, Wei Jiasi glared at them. Chapter 110. Luo Fengxue sneered. She had always been smooth and slick, never arguing with people face to face, but now, she couldn't care less. She looked at Wei Jiasi with ridicule in her eyes and said, Second Senior Martial Sister, not to mention Martial Uncle Shoujing, even I don't like your current appearance. Wei Jiasi was originally a beautiful woman, but right now, she was so angry that her face was distorted. She stretched out her hand and a small scarlet flag appeared in her hand. Luo Fengxue didn't attack, but she didn't show any weakness. She took another step forward and said, Could it be that you want to attack a fellow disciple? Second Senior Martial Sister, you can't keep making mistakes. Wei Jiasi looked like she was struggling. Sometimes she was angry, sometimes she was regretful, but in the end, she put away the flag. Seeing her like this, Luo Fengshue's expression softened a bit. She said slowly, I've been under Master's tutelage since I was a child. When I was young, Second Senior Martial Sister and Eldest Senior Martial Sister always took care of me, played with me, and taught me how to cultivate. Second Senior Martial Sister, you're such a smart and respectable person. Although we're not very close now, I still don't want to see you make mistakes. Second Senior Martial Sister, think about it carefully. Martial Uncle Shoujing is in the middle stage of the core formation realm now. With his cultivation speed, it's very likely that he'll form his nascent soul within 100 years. If he forms his nascent soul, why would he still care about a foundation-building disciple? Don't you know that aside from cultivating, Martial Uncle Shoujing doesn't like anything else? If your cultivation level can't catch up to his, why would he even care about you? Once Luo Fengxue said this, shock appeared in Wei Jiasi's eyes. She then looked at Mo Tiange again. Mo Tiange didn't understand. She knew Wei Jiaxi's gaze meant she was afraid of her, but she already heard most of it. What else couldn't she hear? While Mo Tiange was puzzled, Luo Fengxue already understood Wei Jiaxi's meaning. She turned around and said, Tiange, this place is far from Luoyan Cliff. There might be demonic beasts nearby. Can you help us keep a lookout? Mo Tiange immediately understood what Luo Fengxue meant. The relationship between the two of them was deeper than hers, so maybe there was something inconvenient to say in front of her. Thus, Mo Tiange nodded and said, You guys talk first. I'll go take a look. Luo Fengxue responded, but her eyes were filled with gratitude. Mo Tiange chuckled, then turned around and left. Once Mo Tiange's silhouette disappeared, Luo Fengxue waved her hand. A soundproof barrier immediately appeared, surrounding the two of them. Senior martial sister, if you have something to say, just say it. Maybe you've misunderstood something. Wei Jiaxi, who had been staring at the direction Mo Tiange left, had a complicated look in her eyes. At that moment, she lowered her gaze and said in a low voice, Fengxue, since you already know, I won't hide it from you. I originally didn't dare to have too many delusions, but ever since she came... Senior martial sister, are you saying that martial uncle Shoujing treats Tiange differently? Wei Jiaxi nodded. She then smiled bitterly and said, I know you've always looked down on me regarding this matter, but how could I be willing to let others look down on me? It's just that you've never experienced love, so you don't understand? Luo Fengxue approached Mo Tiange then said calmly, Second martial sister, I did have some complaints about this before, so I hope you can forgive me. Although I don't understand matters of the heart, I know that we aren't mortal women. Naturally, we can't be like mortals. In the cultivation world, the only criterion is one's cultivation level. Martial Uncle Shoujing hasn't taken women seriously for so many years, but it's not necessarily because there aren't any women worthy of his attention. Senior martial sister, don't tell me it's not because Martial Uncle Shoujing is different from ordinary male disciples? Wei Jiaxi was silent. Luo Fengxue's words were straightforward, but she couldn't deny it. Not to mention Martial Uncle Shoujing's appearance and identity, these things were, after all, superficial, but why did she have feelings for him? Wei Jiaxi carefully recalled. At first, she saw that this martial uncle wasn't much older than them, but he was able to purify his heart, restrain his desires, and wholeheartedly cultivate, so she secretly admired him. Later, when she saw that his way of doing things was indeed different from disciples like them and that his cultivation level was even faster, she gradually submitted to him. What if his cultivation level wasn't high? What would happen to me? Wei Jiaxi actually felt a chill run down her spine as she thought about this. She had always thought highly of herself, but only now did she realize that she was actually the same as those women. Second martial sister. Wei Jiaxi regained her train of thought and shook her head gently. I'm fine. Luo Fengxue stared at her worriedly. What are you thinking about? Wei Jiaxi was momentarily speechless. After hesitating for a long time, she finally said, Fengxue, do you think I'm as frivolous as those female disciples? Because Martial Uncle is young and has a high cultivation level, so... It's nothing. Luo Fengxue smiled and said, Martial Uncle Shoujing's way of doing things is indeed very different from Senior Martial Brothers, so he's naturally likable. Senior Martial Sister, you know that I don't really like cultivating, but I'm very interested in wielding power. That's why I can see things clearly. You're the smart one. Wei Jiaxi looked at the direction Mo Tiange left and asked in a low voice, Fengxue, you've always been close to her. Do you know if Martial Uncle really? Before Wei Jiaxi could finish, Luo Fengxue shook her head and said, Second martial sister, don't think too much. I don't believe Martial Uncle Shoujing has any feelings for Tiange. But why did Martial Uncle hide his identity from her? Luo Fengxue also looked puzzled. I think Martial Uncle Shoujing must have his own intentions. But if he really had any intentions, why did he let Tiange cultivate with us? I saw some of the treasures on her body indeed belonged to Martial Uncle. However, even though Martial Uncle Shoujing's concocting skills are superb, I've never seen any medicinal pills on Tienga. Her disciples' rations are the same as ours. It's just that Grandmaster bestowed some things to her. Wei Jiaxi was silent for a long time before Luo Fengxue said, "Second martial sister, don't be suspicious of Tienga. Ever since she came, I've been with her, so I know everything about her. I'll tell you the truth, she's actually the same kind of person as martial uncle Shoujing. She has a firm will and wholeheartedly cultivates. Right now, she doesn't have any intentions, but if you're still like this, she'll definitely leave you behind in the future. At that time, martial uncle Shoujing might really look at her in a different light." Wei Jiaxi looked shocked as she stared at Luo Fengxue. Luo Fengxue smiled bitterly and said with a sigh, "Senior martial sister, don't think I'm just trying to scare you. Tienga has been here for a long time, and she's the closest to me. I don't have any other skills, but I've always been very good at judging people. With Tienga's temperament, it's only a matter of time before she reaches the peak stage of the foundation building realm. Right now, she's Grandmaster's registered disciple. As long as Grandmaster takes good care of her, why would she need to worry about not being able to form her gold core? Martial uncle Shoujing's talent is outstanding. In Xianxia school, the only core formation martial uncle who's the same age as him is martial uncle Lingxi, but martial uncle Lingxi is a man. If martial uncle Shoujing really forms his nascent soul within 100 years and he wants to perform dual cultivation, where would he find a suitable nascent soul cultivator? At that time, he'd probably only be able to choose female cultivators in the core formation realm, and they'd also have to be female cultivators with hopes of forming their nascent soul. Second martial sister, if you don't form your gold core, you won't have any hope." At this point, Wei Jiaxi already understood that she'd taken the wrong path. Without a cultivation level, martial uncle Shoujing wouldn't even spare her a glance. If she couldn't form her gold core, she'd be left behind. Alas, all these years, she'd actually cast aside her most important cultivation level and neglected the essentials to pursue trifles. "Fengxue, thank you." Wei Jiaxi suddenly felt as if she'd been enlightened. She suddenly felt relaxed. All these years, she'd been carrying her feelings on her back, but she didn't dare to let others know. She couldn't abandon them, couldn't bear to part with them. Even her pride and self-esteem had been lost in this difficult pursuit, but she'd forgotten the source of her pride and self-esteem. Without a cultivation level, what right did she have to be proud? What right did she have to make others look at her differently? Upon hearing what Wei Jiaxi said, Luo Fengxue heaved a sigh of relief. Her taut nerves finally relaxed. This place was far from Luoyan Cliff, and there were many demonic beasts in the dense forest. She'd actually been worried. But Wei Jiaxi hesitated. "Martial uncle Shoujing has disappeared. I didn't come here because I was delusional, but my heart is really restless, second martial sister." Luo Fengxue said anxiously, "You're really not as good as Tienga. Tienga is also worried, but she knows her own limits. She's wholeheartedly waiting for martial uncle Qingyuan's news. If she acted like you, wouldn't she be giving Master more trouble?" Wei Jiaxi suddenly frowned. "What do you mean? Didn't you say Tienga doesn't have?" Luo Fengxue realized she said the wrong thing, but she still said calmly, "She thinks it's senior martial brother Qin. But senior martial sister, don't think too much. Tienga only thinks of him as a friend." "Is that so?" Before she could finish speaking, she suddenly took out her flying sword and took out her magic tool. "Second martial sister." Luo Fengxue turned pale with fright. Wei Jiaxi didn't say anything. Her expression was cold and solemn, but a murderous intent emerged in her eyes. She raised her flying sword and the flag at the same time. Luo Fengxue hurriedly took out her own magic tool, but in the next moment, she heard a loud bang. She turned her head and was stunned. While controlling the flying sword, Wei Jiaxi chanted an incantation. Soon afterward, she pointed her spiritual aura at the flag. In an instant, the flag expanded and flashed with lightning. "Fengxue," she shouted. "Why are you in a daze? There are demonic beasts." Luo Fengxue finally regained her senses. She couldn't help but feel ashamed. She thought her senior martial sister wanted to 5 second and third rank demonic beasts. Sensing the breaths of demonic beasts approaching one after another, Luo Fengxue was shocked. The second rank was the early stage of the foundation building realm, while the third rank was the middle stage of the foundation building realm. One of them was in the early stage of the foundation building realm, while the other was in the middle stage of the foundation building realm. The difference in numbers was too big. Wei Jiaxi, who was standing on her flying sword, grabbed a few things and stuffed them into Luo Fengshue's hands. She said anxiously, "Quick! I'll hold them off for a while. You go find Imo Tienga and run back with her." "No, senior martial sister, you're alone. Go quickly," Wei Jiaxi shouted. She glanced at the approaching demonic beasts and said anxiously, "If you don't leave now, it'll be too late. You've just made a realm breakthrough and you're not good at fights of magical powers. If you stay here, you'll only drag me down. Quickly go back and find someone to save her." But halfway through her words, the breaths of demonic beasts were getting closer and closer. "Senior martial sister, come with me." "No, they're too fast. If they come, none of us will be able to escape. Hurry up and be obedient." Luo Fengxue was a decisive person. She immediately clenched her teeth and said, "All right, senior martial sister, hold on." She then turned around and dashed towards the direction Imo Tienga left. However, whether it was with her divine sense or her eyes, she couldn't find any trace of Imo Tienga. "Tienga!" Luo Fengxue shouted anxiously, "Quickly come out. There are demonic beasts." However, her surroundings were quiet. It was as if Imo Tienga had disappeared. There was no response at all. Chapter 111. Imo Tienga knew there must be a formation in front of her, but she couldn't figure it out. Just now, when Luo Fengxue and Wei Jiaxing talked alone, she left alone, planning to find a place that was neither too far nor too close to keep a lookout for them. However, she accidentally found traces of a formation nearby. That wasn't a big deal, but even with her attainments in formations, she couldn't see what this formation was, let alone break it. She had no choice but to go back to look for the two of them. Unexpectedly, she had already fallen into a formation without realizing it and couldn't leave. Everything in front of her was white as if she was in a fog. She couldn't see anything clearly. Imo Tienga pondered for a moment, then stopped moving. Instead, she sat cross-legged and spread her divine sense. Since she had entered the foundation building realm, she had explored several kilometers with her divine sense. Since this was a formation, this distance was enough to find the eye of the formation. However, just as she spread her divine sense, the fog around her seemed to be alive. It surged everywhere and blocked her divine sense. She opened her eyes and frowned deeply. "No, this formation in front of me is so brilliant. It's definitely not laid by demonic beasts with low intelligence. Is there an expert or senior hiding here?" A thought flashed through her mind. She thought of a possibility and shouted, "Martial Uncle Shoujing, is Martial Uncle Shoujing here?" Her voice slowly dispersed in the fog. Imo Tienga waited for a while, but she didn't hear a reply. Did she guess wrong? She thought for a moment, then slowly walked forward. This fog was like a cloud, so thick that it was almost solid. She only walked a few steps, but she found that it was the same everywhere. She couldn't tell the path and couldn't walk. At that moment, a faint light flashed. She moved sideways and a lightning bolt fell on the ground next to her, leaving a scorched mark. Imo Tienga was shocked. She looked around vigilantly but didn't find any other traces. Behind her, the fog gradually condensed into a human figure walking towards her. Imo Tienga trembled all over and lowered her body. This time, it was a flying sword stuck in the ground. She followed the direction of the flying sword and turned around. Shocked, she blurted out, "Second uncle." She saw a long-bearded old man in cyan clothes standing in the fog several feet away. It was Yi Zhang's appearance before he was injured. Nevertheless, in the next second, Imo Tienga became even more vigilant. She knew second uncle was already dead, so the person in front of her was definitely not second uncle. Could it be that this cloud could actually copy people from her imagination? She didn't have the time to think before Yi Jiang raised his hand and withdrew a jade disc. Mo Tiange broke out in a cold sweat when she saw this jade plate. This was second uncle's thick soil plate, which was refined by her father after he formed his gold core. Its power was extraordinary, but when they were escaping from Mount Yunwu, second uncle forcibly attacked, so this thick soil plate was already broken. She was even more certain that this was just a copy of a character based on her impression. However, this formation could actually copy a character from one's imagination, and it could even transform into an artifact. It was quite amazing. Looking at that flying sword just now, its power was probably real. Cold sweat broke out on her forehead, but she didn't even have time to wipe it away. With a wave of her hand, she summoned the shuttle of soaring Apsara. If this second uncle's illusion really had the same power as when he was alive, she was afraid that she would be killed on the spot if she was not careful. The jade plate floated in the air. Yi Jiang's face was expressionless as he formed hand seals and muttered incantations. Streams of spiritual energy continuously struck the jade plate, causing it to swell up like a mat. Nevertheless, Mo Tiange knew this thick soil plate's weakness. This thing was called thick soil, so it naturally had the earth attribute. The earth was thick and solid. If she waited until the spiritual energy was completely injected, this jade plate would directly smash down with enough power to make her suffer. However, this thing needed time to increase its power. If she attacked first and seized the initiative, she could restrain it. Immediately, the shuttle of soaring Apsara turned into a golden net and flew directly towards this illusion. The golden net firmly stabbed into the illusion, causing it to let out a blood-curdling scream. Mo Tiange's hands couldn't help but tremble when she saw second uncle's pained expression. Once she moved, she discovered that this illusion didn't have the reaction speed of a real person, but it was too similar. She clearly knew the second uncle in front of her was fake, but he looked so similar that she almost couldn't bear to attack him. All of a sudden, a malicious glint flashed in the illusion's eyes. He pointed his finger, causing the enlarged thick soil plate to suddenly smash down on her. Mo Tiange's figure flashed. In an instant, she was already several dozen feet away. She clasped her hands together and heard another painful scream. The golden light broke through the illusion's body, and the second uncle in front of her gradually faded away. The thick soil plate also broke inch by inch and disappeared. Mo Tiange wiped the sweat on her face and slowly calmed down. A fake was a fake after all. Second uncle wouldn't look at her like that, and he also wouldn't attack her. She turned around and took 2 steps, but she was stunned again. A person stood several dozen feet away from her. He had handsome eyebrows and a gloomy expression. It was Qin Shi. Mo Tiange instantly released the shuttle of soaring Apsara. However, unlike second uncle, this Qin Shi illusion didn't react to her attack. Instead, he raised his hand, causing the golden light to converge and transform into the shuttle of soaring Apsara again. He caught it in his hand. Mo Tiange was shocked. Ever since she obtained the shuttle of soaring Apsara, she knew the power of this thing. When scattered, it could form a formation. When gathered, it could form a needle. It had form but no substance, and it could kill people without leaving a trace. She grasped the formation to control this thing and refined it for a long time, so how could it be easily taken away by someone? But this was just a fleeting thought. Now wasn't the time to think about this matter. She fumbled in her Qinkuan bag and took out a flying sword and several small flying daggers. The flying daggers were originally the iron-teethed crocodile's fangs. After she built her foundation, she refined them into magic tools in Xianxia School's tool refining shop. Although they weren't very powerful, they were good for sneak attacks. The flying sword faced the enemy head-on while the flying daggers launched a sneak attack from behind. Qin Shi didn't use the shuttle of soaring Apsara. Instead, he took out a sword. It was the sword with an astonishing momentum she once saw. The sword was golden in color and was covered in pulsating flames. The sword lightly swung, knocking her flying sword down. Then, it flicked again, knocking all the flying daggers away. Mo Tiange was stunned. Although she still had magic tools on her, She hadn't refined them yet. Right now, she could only hurriedly take out several defensive talismans and put them on her body. She also took out a wind spell talisman and threw it out. By the time she finished doing all these, Xianxia's sword had already arrived. In an instant, it split into 2, 2 into 4, 4 into 8, all of which directly attacked Tienge from different directions. Tienge simply didn't have enough time to react. She could only watch helplessly as the sword pierced her body. However, she didn't feel the pain she expected. Instead, her body felt lighter, and the sword's might vanished in a flash. The Xianxia in front of her also gradually dissipated, and the shuttle of soaring Apsara fell. Tienge was still in a state of shock. After thinking for a moment, she understood. The person was fake, and the surrounding environment was also fake, so the attack was also fake. It was just an illusion created by relying on spiritual aura fluctuations. She made up her mind and retrieved her flying sword, shuttle of soaring Apsara, and other things. She then sat down cross-legged and slowly recovered her spiritual aura. At this moment, a person once again appeared in front of her. It was the already dead Su Jingji. She didn't know who killed Su Jingji in the fight for the foundation-building pill. After that, she was faced with a lot of problems, so she never thought about him again. Now that she saw Su Jingji, she couldn't help but feel her heart fluctuate. However, a moment later, she adjusted her state of mind. She closed her eyes and concentrated on adjusting her breath. She sensed Su Jingji's talisman flying towards her, but she didn't move. She was already in the foundation-building realm now, so Su Jingji's attack was very weak. The moment the talisman came into contact with her body, it swayed and disappeared along with Su Jingji. After that, Murong Yen, senior martial brother Zhou Luo Fengxue, and the others appeared one by one. Since Tienge had already comprehended the mystery behind the talisman, she just pretended she didn't see anything and sat in meditation in silence. When she opened her eyes again, the scenery in front of her was no longer the indistinct sea of fog and clouds. Instead, it was a vast expanse of yellow sand and the scorching sun. Tienge pondered for a moment, then stood up and looked around. Boundless yellow sand, the sun hanging high in the sky, and the fierce wind, it looked very much like the desert in the west of the celestial pole. She once again released her divine sense, but she discovered that it spread out without any hindrance. Feeling this, Tienge was pleasantly surprised. She immediately closed her eyes and concentrated on exploring with her divine sense. Soon, a smile appeared on her face. The eye of the formation. She found the eye of the formation. After carefully sensing her surroundings, Tienge opened her eyes and judged her direction. According to her divine sense, the eye of the formation was located about half a mile away. This distance was very reasonable. If she could reach the eye of the formation, she should be able to escape. The yellow sand under her feet was extremely soft. When she stepped on it, it sank up to her knees. Like walking on snow, every step was extremely difficult. She originally wanted to fly, but she discovered she couldn't fly in this place. She could only calm down and move forward one step at a time. The wind blew up the yellow sand, making whooshing sounds and fiercely hitting her face, making her feel extremely painful. The scorching sun shone on her body, making her feel like her whole body was burning. Tienge was stunned when she sensed this. She was already a foundation-building cultivator now, so she was immune to heat and cold. Why did she feel uncomfortable being shone by the sun and hurt being hit by the gale? Realizing this problem, she immediately wanted to move the spiritual aura in her body to arrange a defensive barrier around her. However, she was stunned. Her body was completely empty. Whether it was her dantian or meridians, there was no spiritual aura at all. After standing for a while, Tienge's face was covered in sweat. This formation actually turned her into a mortal. She wiped the sweat from her face and put her hand into her Qianquan bag. It was useless. Opening the Qianquan bag required a bit of spiritual aura, but now she didn't even have this bit of spiritual aura. She couldn't use her Qianquan bag, she had nothing on her body, and she had no spiritual aura, so she couldn't cast a single spell. Now, she could only use her divine sense. However, her soul-refining technique hadn't reached its peak yet, so it was useless. After thinking for a while, she calmed down and continued to walk step by step towards the eye of the formation. In any case, if she found the eye of the formation, there would definitely be a turning point. After walking for a while with her head down, Emotienga turned around and saw that the sand and wind had gradually covered her footprints in the direction she came from. She closed her eyes again to sense her position, but what she saw shocked her once again. The distance of that position didn't change at all. She thought quickly. Could it be that she didn't go out at all? But the footprints were real. Then, could it be that the position changed? Thinking of this, her face couldn't help but turn pale. If that was the case, she didn't have the ability to resist at all. Calm down, calm down. Emotienga muttered in her heart. She then took a deep breath and began to think from the beginning. This formation was obviously an illusory formation, but it was a fact that she had no spiritual aura right now. How could she break this formation? There was no killing intent around her. The scorching sun, the yellow sand, and the gale were a kind of torment. This was either a trap or a test of her willpower. After thinking for a while, she clenched her teeth and continued to walk forward. If she didn't move, it would be a trap, but if she moved, she might have a chance to survive. Step by step, she didn't know how long she had been walking. Her vision started to blur, but her willpower remained firm and she clenched her teeth. Her hands were so sore that she almost couldn't lift her legs. The wind became stronger, and the sun became hotter. Finally, her body went limp. She fell to the ground and passed out. After a long time, the sky seemed to be torn apart. A crack appeared, and a man wearing a Daoist robe floated in from the outside. He muttered in a low voice, "The little girl isn't bad. She actually persisted for this long. Aling, for your sake, I won't make things difficult for her." Chapter 112. It was dark in front of her. Her primordial spirit was sleeping in her Dantian's sea of consciousness. Emotienga vaguely heard some voices. "Aling, does this little girl really have your spiritual roots of the origin?" It was a man's voice. It was deep, clear, and very pleasing to the ear. It sounded like he wasn't very old. "Haven't you seen it yourself? Why are you asking me?" This voice was clearer and sharper. It should belong to a younger man. He sounded a bit impatient. Hearing this, the first person said, "I'm just asking." The man called Aling let out "Umph." Right after that, Emotienga felt a powerful force rushing into her meridians. She couldn't help but moan, not because of pain, but because of numbness. This force was extremely powerful. When it rushed into her meridians, she felt like her meridians were no longer under her control. However, this force was warm and made her feel very comfortable. Spiritual roots of the origin, pure Yin constitution. Alas, I don't know if I should say she's lucky or unlucky, Aling muttered. "What do you mean by lucky and unlucky?" The first man was curious. Aling answered, "You should know the cultivation method of spiritual roots of the origin. There are only two words, balance and permanence. The whole body is regarded as a universe. The 5 elements generate each other, and Yin and Yang balance each other. However, people with pure Yin constitution have Yin and no Yang in their bodies. Solitary Yin doesn't grow, and solitary Yang doesn't grow. So this little girl's spiritual roots of the origin won't have any benefits? That's not true. Pure Yin is also divided into 5 elements. She can completely cultivate the balance of the 5 elements of pure Yin first before considering other things. You want to teach her the art of the origin? Since she's my descendant, I should take care of her. Besides, she has my spiritual roots of the origin. How can I just ignore her? I'm afraid it's because of your incomparably charming Miss Yaoqing, right? Hearing such sour words, Aling was furious. In any case, she left behind my bloodline. Can you give me a child? If you can give me a child, I'll immediately throw this girl out. The man begged for mercy. I was just saying. Don't be angry, After a moment of silence, Aling said, Her foundation in the art of Sunu is quite good. It'd be a pity to cripple it. If she switched to cultivating my Taiyuan record now, it'd be very difficult for her to achieve the desired cultivation effect. Alas, if she performed dual cultivation with a man with a pure yang constitution, she'd be able to artificially create a yin and yang balance. As soon as he said that, the man immediately shouted, "Don't look at me. I didn't even like your Miss Yaoqing back then, let alone this little girl who's still wet behind the ears. Besides, I don't even know which generation this girl is your descendant. This is too unethical." Ling was furious again. "Get lost. Do you think there's no one else with a pure yang constitution besides you? What kind of filthy things are in his head?" Mo Tienga wanted to wake up, but her primordial spirit seemed to be extremely exhausted. Not only did it have no reaction at all, but her remaining consciousness was also fuzzy. In the end, she once again passed out. When she finally regained consciousness, she abruptly sat up. What she saw was a small wooden hut with a wooden bed, a wooden cabinet, a bamboo chair, and a bamboo cup. She didn't know what kind of spiritual plant it was, but it was full of spiritual aura, almost visible to the naked eye. Not only that, but the surrounding spiritual aura was several times denser than in her Immortal's cave on Mount Taikang. What kind of place was this? She looked down and found that her body was intact. Even the burn on her back from fighting demonic beasts was no longer painful. The spiritual aura in her body not only recovered, but also seemed to be a bit stronger. She suddenly remembered the two voices she heard when she was in a daze. Aling, spiritual root of the origin, Yaoqing, and descendant. When these words were connected, the answer was obvious. The Mo family's ancestor was the other ancestor Mo Yaoqing mentioned. Mo Tienga held her head, wondering if it was just a dream. Mo Yaoqing said she was a person from thousands of years ago who eventually died of old age. Mo Yaoqing herself was a nascent soul cultivator, and these two people were also nascent soul cultivators. It was impossible for them to live thousands of years longer than Mo Yaoqing. Or were they ghosts? Or were they unknown existences? She patted her head, got out of bed, pushed the door open, and slowly walked out of the small room. In the distance, there were green mountains, the fragrance of flowers, several wooden houses, a pond, and two men. It was a picturesque scene. While she was still in a daze, the two men sitting under the tree playing chess turned their heads. "Little girl, you're awake? Come and sit." Mo Tienga looked over. The one talking to her was a handsome man in a Daoist robe. He was currently holding a chess piece with a smile on his face. The person sitting opposite him was also a young man, but he looked a bit younger. His face still retained the sharpness and elegance of a youth. At first glance, she only felt that these two people were as deep as the sea. They didn't reveal anything, and she couldn't tell what realm their cultivation levels were. However, this kind of momentum meant they must be senior experts, so she didn't dare to be frivolous. She approached them in a well-behaved manner and saluted them. Junior Mo Tienga greets the two seniors. Mo Tienga? The man who spoke before turned his head and looked at the young man opposite him. "You're really surnamed Mo. It seems you're undoubtedly Miss Yaoqing's descendant." Upon hearing their conversation, Mo Tienga knew the conversation she heard while she was in a daze wasn't a dream. She immediately looked at the other young man. Was this person Aling, the other ancestor Mo Yaoqing mentioned? The young man looked pensive. After staring at her for a long time, he finally said, "Junior, tell me about your background." When Mo Tienga heard his voice, it was indeed exactly the same as Aling. Too many thoughts flashed through her mind, but she only thought about it for a moment before she said, "Junior's ancestor indeed has a person named Yaoqing. May I ask if Senior is this another ancestor of mine?" The two people glanced at each other. The young man said slowly, "As soon as you entered the illusory sky formation, I knew you were my descendant. If you have an ancestor named Mo Yaoqing, that's right." Mo Tienga's mood surged when she heard the confirmation. She brushed her clothes and knelt down. Mo Tienga greets Senior Great Ancestor. Junior didn't know and couldn't salute. Please forgive me, great ancestor. May I ask great ancestor's name? The young man showed a faint smile. He gently flicked his sleeve, and a powerful force lifted her up. My name is Zhong Muling, and my Daoist name is Chiling. I'm your ancestor, so I have no qualms accepting your kneeling. However, I've never taken care of you, so you don't have to be so polite. Once Zhong Muling finished speaking, the man opposite him smiled and said, Little girl, you're quite polite. Emotienga then turned around and asked, May I ask how I should address you, senior? The man answered, My name is Yuan Bao. You can call me by my full name. Don't call me Senior Yuan. So it's Senior Yuan Bao. Since you're someone close to my great ancestor, you're also Junior Senior. Emotienga bowed deeply. Her behavior left a good impression on Yuan Bao. He smiled and said, That'll do. You're Aling's descendant, so you naturally have your own benefits. You don't have to be so polite. Sit. Emotienga turned to look at Zhong Muling. Seeing him nodding slightly, she finally sat down on another stone bench. A shocking thought appeared in her mind, and it was most likely true. Mo Yaoqing passed away several thousand years ago with her nascent soul cultivation level. These two people lived at the same time, but they lived until now, so their cultivation levels were most likely above the nascent soul realm. That was the deification realm. Yuan Bao stared at her, then said to Zhong Muling with a smile, This little girl is very smart. It seems she already knows our cultivation levels. Zhong Muling raised the corners of his lips and nodded with satisfaction. You're my descendant, so how can you be too stupid? Girl, I've been away from the secular world for many years. I occasionally go back, so I know you have a Mo family's village now. It's just that you're too young, so I didn't see it last time. She only heard from their conversation that they seemed to have met martial uncle Shoujing, so she asked cautiously, Great ancestor, Senior Yuan Bao, have you met martial uncle Shoujing? Is he all right? Zhong Muling turned around and nodded at her. That youngster should be the martial uncle Shoujing you mentioned. About half a month ago, he accidentally broke into the illusory sky formation and was injured. However, he finished healing his injuries a few days ago and left. At this point, he suddenly said with some anger, he actually thought the illusory sky formation was a place to heal his injuries. Yuan Bao smiled. That's because he's brave and thought we didn't have any bad intentions. Martial uncle Shoujing was indeed all right. Emotienga hesitated for a moment, then asked, or was there a youngster beside him who looked a bit like him? Around 20 years old, early stage foundation building realm? I didn't see him. Zhong Muling didn't even think about it. He immediately shook his head and denied it. That'll do. Go write your art of Sunu first and let me watch. Leave this spirit-concealing pendant with me first. I'll see if I can refine it again. You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.